Midlands, southern parts and eastern parts of Wales, East Anglia and southern England. Some dense patches of fog likely by Wednesday morning. Cold as well, -2, -3, towns and cities. Rural spots much lower than that, but not as cold further north. There'll be the winds picking up and there'll be more cloud. But the winds will strengthen further during Wednesday, getting very, very windy in the far northwest. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place covering the Western Isles and parts of the northwest of the mainland of Scotland. 75-mile-an-hour gusts are possible, particularly as this rain band moves in through the afternoon. That could cause some travel disruption. Could be some disruption from the fog in the south as well, but that should clear by late morning, and then it's another sparkling day of sunshine with temperatures close to average, getting up to 7 to 9 Celsius. Perhaps a little higher in eastern Scotland, but it will be windy here, and then this rain band sinks southwards, bringing a bit of snow in its wake across northern Scotland for a time on Wednesday evening. As it pushes south into Thursday, it's fizzling out. So again, most of England and Wales not seeing much rain at all, but it will be cloudier, so it won't be as cold or as foggy on Thursday morning across the south. In fact, it's generally a dry and a bright day for many on Thursday, but there will be showers coming into western Scotland. Still very windy across the far north, just not as windy as Wednesday. Brighter skies coming in across the south by the afternoon, and temperatures again mostly in mid to high single figures.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. It's a proper news day today, ladies and gentlemen. Coming up, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has described the crimes of rapist Metropolitan Police Officer David Carrick as a scar on our police. The 48-year-old will serve at least 30 years behind bars, as a judge said that he used his job to take monstrous advantage of women, as he was sentenced earlier today. We'll have the latest with our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. And it's Cabinet Reshuffle Day, everybody. Bizarrely, there is now a new position of energy security and net zero. How on earth can we have energy security and net zero? Go figure. We'll also have a new Tory party chairman as well. Is this a political team that you could vote for? And we will be going live to a press conference on the search for the missing mum, Nicola Bulley, who went missing 11 days ago. And as well, we're going to be speaking to the man tasked with searching the river. So we'll find out a lot more very, very shortly. Also, are we too soft on Islamist terrorists? The Prevent scheme has been accused of treating them like victims of a mental health disorder instead of dangerous radical criminals. It's the latest incident in soft touch Britain, if you ask me. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Would you scrap net zero? And are we too soft on terrorists? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 3:01. Rishi Sunak has revealed his new cabinet following a reshuffle this morning, whilst creating 4 new departments. Greg Hands takes over as the new Conservative Party chairman after Nadeem Zahawi was sacked. Kemi Badenoch is the new Secretary of State for Business and Trade. Lucy Fraser has become the Culture Secretary, taking over from Michelle Donnellan, who's been made a new Science and Technology Secretary. The Business, Trade and Culture departments have been broken down into separate units, with Grant Shapps now Energy Secretary. The Prime Minister says the creation of a new department focused specifically on energy, as it's so important.
I think we've seen over the last year in particular the impact that happens to people's bills at home when energy policy doesn't work properly, when we're reliant on imported energy from hostile countries. That's why the creation today of a new department focused specifically on energy security and net zero is so important. It's going to mean that we can reduce people's energy bills. That's so important. It means we can produce more energy here at home, giving us independence and security. And it means we can transition to cleaner forms of energy as we hit our net zero ambitions and create jobs in the process.
Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has apologised to women in London for failing in policing following the sentencing of former officer David Carrick. The 48-year-old has been handed 36 life sentences and has to serve a minimum of 30 years behind bars for sexual offences against a dozen women. Mr Carrick pleaded guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, all carried out whilst he was serving in the force. Handing down the sentence, Mrs Justice Chima Grubb referred to what she called a spectacular downfall for a man charged with upholding the law. Sir Mark Rowley says he is determined to root out misconduct in the force.
People are going to be very shaken by this. I completely recognise that. We are determined to tackle this. Most of our people are great people, but we've been too weak at getting rid of the ones who aren't. So you're going to see, month by month, changes as we remove those individuals, and you can report on that. I know my words today aren't enough. People have heard me talk about plans, and they're going to want to see the action that we take over forthcoming months, and they will see that.
The Foreign Secretary says 3 British nationals are missing following the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. James Cleverly also told the Commons 35 others are caught up in the disaster. Turkey's president has declared a state of emergency for 3 months in the 10 cities impacted. More than 5,100 people have been killed. The first 7.8 magnitude quake hit yesterday morning, with the second major earthquake measuring 7.5 just a few hours later. Almost 6,000 buildings have been destroyed in the tremor and aftershocks. An aid worker for Islamic Relief, Salah Abul Ghassan, told GB News about the rescue efforts.
There are fuel shortages, so some of the cranes and some of the tractors that we need that are so vital in such a time in order to clear that rubble, unfortunately we've got fuel shortages. Consistently there are electrical shortages, there are communication towers that have been sort of cut off at times, so it's really desperate. We're trying to get as many people as possible evacuated.
Surrey police have confirmed the deaths of Epsom College head teacher Emma Patterson and her daughter Letty are being treated as a murder investigation. The 2 bodies were found, along with Emma's husband George, in the grounds of the school in the early hours of Sunday. The force have said George Patterson had recently been in contact with the police about his shotgun licence in order to change his address to the site of the school. An underwater search for missing mother Nicola Bulley is still underway in the River Wyre. It's been 11 days since Miss Bulley went missing after taking her dog for a walk in St Michael's on Wyre in Lancashire. The search follows a fresh appeal by her partner, who said her 2 daughters desperately miss her and need her back. The BBC chairman has denied giving Boris Johnson financial advice before getting the job at the broadcaster, calling their relationship broadly professional. Richard Sharp has appeared for questioning before a cross-panel party of MPs this morning. It's after it was revealed he was involved in helping secure Mr Johnson a loan of up to £800,000 before the then Prime Minister backed his appointment to the role at the BBC. His selection is also under investigation. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now it's over to Patrick.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, so serial rapist former police officer David Carrick was bold and at times relentless, trusting that none of his victims would overcome their shame and fear to report him. That's according to Judge Mrs Justice Chima Grubb, who handed him a jail sentence of at least 30 years at Southwark Crown Court earlier today. The 48-year-old is one of the country's worst sex offenders, and he joined the Met in 2001. Now, when it comes to whether or not his sentence is long enough, just have a think, because listen to this. He pleaded guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, some multiple incidents, by the way, meaning they relate to at least 85 separate offences, including at least 71 sexual offences and 48 rapes. This afternoon, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, described his crimes as a scar on our police, adding that it is vital we uncover how he was able to wear the uniform for so long. That minimum of 30 years is causing a lot of ructions with you in the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.uk. A lot of you saying that it should be even longer. GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White is at Southwark Crown Court and joins me now. Mark, a deeply, deeply disturbing case.
Yes, and it is a very long sentence, 30-plus years before he's even considered for parole. He will at that time if he lives that long. And, of course, even at that age, there's no guarantee that he would actually be eligible. There's been lots of reaction coming in throughout the morning and into the afternoon on the sentence and indeed David Carrick, including the Metropolitan Police Commissioner Mark Rowley, saying he is now determined to root out those corrupt officers who should never wear uniform in the first place. This is what he said in a statement outside Scotland Yard.
Not have been a police officer. There were many signs that we should have joined together. He should have been rooted out during his career as a police officer. It's upsetting to be stood here talking about this, and I apologise again to the victims, and indeed I apologise to the women of London, many of whom I'm sure will be troubled, and their trust in policing will be shaken by these events.
Well, so Mark Rowley said that on the 31st of March they will give a comprehensive update on what they're doing to those corrupt officers. And no doubt this has been a very bad period for the Metropolitan Police, seeing the departure of the old Commissioner, Cressida Dick, and this new Commissioner already facing crises as he arrives in post. I've been looking back at the abuses caused by a serving police officer who should have been protecting the public. As a Metropolitan Police officer, PC David Carrick was supposed to protect the public. Instead, he preyed on them, using his status as an armed officer to trick, control and silence his victims. A serial offender, he admitted to a staggering total of almost 50 offences, including 24 separate counts of rape. At Scotland Yard, the force may be under new management, but it is an all too familiar picture. A humiliating act of public contrition, amid promises that the Met is focused on cleaning up its act.
We haven't applied the same sense of ruthlessness to guarding our own integrity that we routinely apply to confronting criminals, and I'm deeply sorry for that.
PC Carrick worked as a firearms officer in the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, whose officers guard key buildings like Parliament, embassies and Downing Street. It's the unit where PC Wayne Couzens, another corrupt officer, served. He went on to kidnap, rape and murder marketing executive Sarah Everard in March 2021. The court heard how PC Carrick repeatedly humiliated his victims, locking some women in the understairs cupboard at his home here in Stevenage, or forcing them to clean his house naked, referring to his victims as slaves and telling them when they could eat and sleep. His crimes went undetected by the force he worked for, despite his behaviour being brought to the attention of senior officers on 9 separate occasions. In 2000, Carrick was accused of burglary and sending abusive messages, but the next year he passed the vetting procedures to join the Metropolitan Police. While serving, he was first accused of harassment and assault in 2002. He came to their attention again 2 years later after an alleged domestic incident. Despite a string of other allegations, none of them proven, he passed fresh vetting checks in 2017. In July 2021, he was placed on restricted duties after being arrested on suspicion of rape. But 2 months later, those restrictions were lifted after the charges were dropped. It was only in October that year that Carrick was finally suspended after prosecutors charged him following another allegation of rape at this hotel in St Albans by a woman he'd met on a dating app.
An absolute shocking case, this one.
Policing analyst Graham Wetton said this appalling breach of trust underlines the urgent need to change the standards and the culture within the UK's biggest police force.
This was a dreadful case, and it has to be a priority for the new Commissioner and the management team to address the issues with the Met, restore trust and confidence by looking at any offending that's gone on and root these people out of policing.
PC David Carrick's crimes have had a devastating impact on the lives of his victims. But the failure of his commanding officers to act far sooner has destroyed the trust of many others within the wider community. Mark White, GB News at Scotland Yard.
Just an absolutely shocking case and a complete monster of a man, clearly, and lots of you getting in touch with me right now to say throw away the key for this evil beast. It does equate to something like less than a year for every single crime. How does that equate to it? Of course, he will be 78 years old, supposedly, by the time he's considered for parole, which I think we can all agree we probably hope he doesn't get. But joining me now is Emma Kay. She's a founder of Walk Safe, and it's a company which has developed an app that allows people walking home to plot their route through safe zones by bringing police crime data, community-reported data and soon CCTV together. But she's also recently been on a panel discussing trust in the Met Police. Emma, thank you very, very much. Look, it's great to have you on the show. I am sick and tired of reporting on a merry-go-round of misery at the Met, where every single week, it seems, Mark Rowley is wheeled out in front of the press to go, look, I'm very sorry about all of this. Look, it looks really bad, and we're going to try and increase trust. And yet again, here we are. This is staggering. What do you make of that sentencing today, 30 years min?
It should just read life sentencing. I mean, isn't that what we all want to hear and read? I agree with you. I'm kind of just sick of being told to flag down a bus, that the Commissioner doesn't mind his daughter walking home late at night, or that we're just sorry that we didn't act sooner, that the vetting procedures were not in place. I mean, the fact that someone's under investigation, then they are not immediately suspended, they're continually within the job. And we wonder why I feel like I'm in this dystopian nightmare of like nothing's changing. And it just feels like these poor victims, I mean, the strength and bravery that they have shown to get Carrick, to see some justice. I just want to honour them today because they're just so brave.
And they go, oh, all right, well, it didn't warrant a whole life tariff. Part of the reason for that was, well, he pled guilty. He pled guilty because he was absolutely, completely and utterly banged to rights, and there were so many charges against him, and the only way he would ever see the light of day again, albeit at 78 years old at the earliest, was if he pled guilty. In cases such as this, surely pleading guilty shouldn't matter a jot.
I mean, I read the stories and the things that he did to those victims, chaining them up, making them clean his house, putting firearms to their heads. I mean, this isn't just a sexual harassment case, 24 rapes. I mean, it is just utterly horrendous. The lasting damage that he has done to those victims, and dare I even say it, victims we may not even know of right now. I mean, his horrific offences have gone on over such a long period of time. He deserves life. And I think we need to hear that from, from everyone right now.
Look, Emma, as well, I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but for someone as completely and utterly sick and twisted as this depraved individual, the fact is he will obviously have the sick, twisted memories of what he's done for the rest of his life and be able to replay them in any way he sees fit. The 30-year sentence is nothing compared to what the victims are going to have to go through. They have got a full life sentence. Can you talk to me a little bit about this app that you've created? Part of me is really glad that you've done it, and it's a great thing that it exists. It's just a shame that it has to, isn't it? But what is it?
100%. And, we always say in an ideal world, we wish it didn't have to exist, but we're here to support everyone. Ultimately, we're a free personal safety app that has a suite of digital tools to help people to stay safer and make safer decisions when they're out and about. Following the horrendous case of Nicola, where we still don't know what has happened to her. We've recently got a new Follow Me feature where you can be followed in real time. Should anything happen, a last known location gets sent to your loved one. We're putting a huge emphasis on businesses at the moment to create safer spaces, to actually do the relevant training in like anti-spiking, Ask for Angela. And we're really just trying to encourage people to put safety on the agenda for absolutely everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for coming on the show. And hopefully people have got something out of this. That app is Walk Safe. So there you go. Look, obviously, Emma, that was Emma Kay, by the way. Thank you, Emma. Emma mentioned there about the case of Nicola Bulley. It's a massive mystery case that seems to have gripped the nation. Mother, dog walker, we all know the story there. We will be going, supposedly anyway, in about 10 minutes or so time to a live conference on that for an update. And then I'm going to be talking as well to the individual who is in charge of scouring that river at the moment. That is the case of Nicola Bulley. So we'll go to that shortly. But moving on, it's politics time, people. It's been reshuffle day, hasn't it? And Rishi Sunak has created 4 new departments as part of his Whitehall shake-up. He says by switching things up, there will be a greater focus on the issues which matter to future generations. Changes are still being announced, but so far, Greg Hands has become Conservative Party chairman. Now, this is interesting. Lots of you saying, well, this guy's a hardcore Remainer. This can't be a good thing. Slightly countered, I think, by the fact that box office Red Wall MP Lee Anderson is his deputy. He's certainly not a sopping wet Remainer, is he? Sunak has also broken up the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, creating 3 new cabinet roles in the process. But it seems these sweeping reforms come at cost because the Liberal Democrats, remember them, have claimed that they could have a price tag of £60 million, so the cost of setting up a department. One of the big departments that's raised eyebrows, by the way, is now we have a Minister for Energy Security and net zero. People are saying that those things are incompatible. But let's speak to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is in Westminster. Darren, I remember not so long ago, you were glued to the steps of Downing Street as Rishi announced his first cabinet. Now it's, well, not all change, but quite a lot of change. What's going on?
Yeah, and in some ways, actually, it's more change around the departmental structures and the structures within government than really the personalities. In fact, what's most interesting about today is that no one's been sacked. Rishi Sunak's job creating, if you like, or moving and shuffling people around. What is also interesting is that Dominic Raab, the current Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, remains in post. Much speculation about his future given that inquiry, but it's clear that Rishi Sunak wants to hold on to him until that inquiry wraps up and we find out, of course, these allegations of bullying Dominic Raab has always denied. But let's look at what the Prime Minister has announced today. First of all, Greg Hands, a safe pair of hands, if one likes, quite a well-liked minister, has moved to be the new chairman of the Conservative Party, taking over from Nadeem Zahawi. I think in many ways that is quite a conservative move, if you like, in the sense that he's been around for a long time. He's seen as quite effective, particularly as a campaigner, but also not likely to have any skeletons in the corner. But my word, he's got an uphill task, hasn't he, Patrick, ahead of the local elections and the general election next year. Interesting too that Kemi Badenoch has had her departmental reach massively widened, not just looking now at trade but business as well. And as you say, Grant Shapps taking over this new department, the Department of Energy energy security and net zero. Interesting for two reasons. First of all, it's reprising a department that did exist under David Cameron, the Department of Energy, but also that includes this term net zero, and a real signal, I think, to the party in the country that Rishi Sunak's not going to step away from that target of trying to get the country down to net zero by the middle of the century. There's also been a whole raft, it must be said, of junior ministerial shuffles and appointments today as well, including, as you said, Lee Anderson, that red wall Tory, becoming the deputy Conservative leader. And so what you've got in some ways is a yin and yang. You've got a blue wall Conservative as leader or as chairman of the party, and you've got Lee Anderson as deputy. All in all, though, yeah, you're right. I mean, what's this going to achieve? Is it going to make the government more effective? Is it going to bring about some type of efficiency? It certainly sends a signal about where the Prime Minister wants his focus to be on, whether that is on energy or on science, for example. But many would suggest this is going to mean mass reorganisation here in Whitehall. That takes months in itself. And it's not entirely clear if it's really going to achieve very much. All in all, though, the one notable thing is it seems to have gone rather smoothly today. Not an awful lot of people knew, even within government, this was going to happen yesterday. It's all happened this morning. And as far as I can see, there's not that many complaints. Though one senior Conservative MP did say to me, don't mention Titanic and deck chairs.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor from Westminster. I suppose one way to avoid the kind of mass conflict and no, I'm not going and all of these rows happen is if you just don't sack anyone, I suppose. Anyway, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, we will be going live to a press conference in the search for the missing mum, Nicola Bulley, who disappeared. It was 11 days ago now. And, crucially, I'm also going to be speaking, again live, with the man tasked with searching the river to try and find her. Some interesting comments coming out about that. Her phone potentially being used as a decoy, etc. We'll drill down. 3 British nationals are missing after earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. I'll bring you the latest on the devastation and the rescue efforts. As the death toll has now surpassed 5,000, concerns it could raise as high as 20,000. And are the Prevent programme treating terrorists like victims? All of that to come and much more. I'll be back in a mo.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Look, just to let you all know that in about 5 minutes or so, we are going to go live to a press conference to get the latest on the missing mum and dog walker case, Nicola Bulley. I'm also, after that, going to be speaking to the man who is currently charged anyway with searching the river there in Lancashire. So stay tuned for that. But just before that, the Foreign Secretary has confirmed within the last hour 3 British nationals are missing following the earthquakes which struck Turkey and Syria. Turkey's President Erdogan has also declared a 3-month state of emergency in 10 of the country's provinces. 2 quakes struck yesterday and took place 9 hours apart, measuring at 7.8 in Turkey and 7.5 in Syria on the Richter scale. Meanwhile, a 3rd tremor struck today, measuring 5.7. Approximately 5,000 people have died so far, around 20,000 injured. That number is expected to rise. Some reports that the death toll could itself be as high as 20,000. Neighbouring Syria are reeling, of course, from 2 consecutive earthquakes, the region's strongest in nearly a century, devastating huge swathes of territory. And for those of you watching on TV, you can see a young boy now being pulled from the rubble in northern Syria. International aid effort is increasing and the UK is sending search and rescue teams to the area. The US and South Korea are also sending aid, with international appeals for help still taking place. Joining me now is Aziz Hussain, the CEO of SKT Welfare, an Islamic charity that focuses on emergency relief and aid for those in need. And they currently have a hospital set up in the hit province of Idlib, where they are treating patients. Thank you very much for joining me. I mean, it's just absolutely devastating, isn't it? What's it like where you are?
So I've just, firstly, thank you for having me on, Patrick. So I've just got off the phone a few minutes ago from our team in Syria. Our hospital, the Al Huda Hospital, is based in northern Syria, Idlib province, as you've just mentioned. And the recent figures are that over 1,700 people have been treated at our hospital over the last 2 days, the day and a half since the earthquake struck at 4 a.m. yesterday. Hundreds more are waiting in the corridors to be treated. The hospital's at capacity, which means we're overwhelmed. Medical supplies and medical aid is very, very short. And the message that I've literally just got now, whilst I was waiting to come on air, is that, you know, major medical medicine is required, because people are just going to die. They don't have access to such complex medical aid, and right now, so the situation is quite dire.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, you are actually based in Yorkshire yourself, aren't you? And of course, the charity that you work for has got people on the ground. For people again watching on television, they'll be able to see live images now of a rescue operation taking place in Turkey. The death toll at the moment stands at around 5,000, expected to potentially rise to as high as 20,000. Do you think that looks realistic?
So the World Health Organization estimated this morning that it will rise up to 20,000. Our own estimates are that, unfortunately, it's looking very likely. It certainly surpassed the 10,000 mark in the next day or two. There's many, many buildings. I mean, in Turkey alone, in Turkey, over 15,000 buildings, according to our estimates, have been destroyed. And these are not single-storey, double-storey houses, but 6, 7, 8-storey buildings and flats where, you know, hundreds of people live in. Secondly, it happened at 4 a.m. in the morning, so a lot of people were sleeping at that time. And so, unfortunately, once the rubble starts to get cleared, I think that death toll is looking very likely, sadly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is incredibly terrible situation over there, isn't it? And I've seen, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners have as well, rather harrowing footage of newborn babies, for example, being pulled out. The story of a lady who actually went into labour as the earthquake initially struck, and sadly she is believed to have passed away. The baby, as we understand it, has been rescued. When people hear stories like that, of course, it really hammers it home to them, and I've got no doubt that people will be desperate to try to help and donate money. How can they get in touch with you guys and do what they can, frankly, to try to help in this relief effort?
I mean, just if I can just take a minute and describe a young girl that was brought into our hospital recently, doesn't know who her parents are. The rescue teams had gone in, rescued her, came in with internal bleeding and has been treated and now looked after by our hospital staff. And unfortunately, these stories are ever so common and are becoming uncommon. In terms of helping, sktwelfare.org is our website. All the information is on there. We're currently appealing for emergency medical donations for emergency medical aid. Like I said, the hospital is overrun. Supplies are very, very short and donations are required in order to be able to treat the hundreds of people that are waiting right now in our hospital, in the corridors. Our X-ray unit is to capacity. We're having people waiting there. MRI scanners are all to capacity, just waiting for people to come in and be able to have that facility. You know, can you imagine when we're having the issue here in the UK, but in Syria, where our hospital is, there's not another one for another 25 kilometres. And so and we're very close to the epicenter in terms of the damage that's been caused within Syria. And so the demand is just so great. It's heartbreaking.
The mind boggles, and of course, unfortunately, the infrastructure over there clearly, sadly, not built to withstand anything like the scale of the earthquakes that we've seen, and indeed the aftershocks that we've seen as well. Aziz, thank you very much for coming on, sharing those stories, and hopefully we can manage to get a few donations your way as well. Aziz, you're saying there, the CEO of SKT Welfare. That's sktwelfare.org. If you've watched that, been moved by it, and want to do what you can to donate. That death toll again expected, and he said it was quite a realistic expectation as well, to rise to around the 20,000 mark. Really staggering humanitarian incident taking place in Turkey and Syria. And for what it's worth as well, at least three Brits confirmed missing over there. Now, look, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, we will be going live very shortly to a press conference in the search for the missing mum, Nicola Bulley, who disappeared 11 days ago. And after that, I'm going to be speaking again live with the man tasked with searching the river to try to find her. Incredibly mysterious case, isn't it? But first, your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3:33. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak has revealed his new cabinet following a reshuffle this morning whilst creating 4 new departments. Greg Hands takes over as the new Conservative Party chairman after Nadeem Zahawi was sacked. Kemi Badenoch is the new Secretary of State for Business and Trade. Michelle Donlan has become a new Science and Technology Secretary, with Lucy Fraser taking over her old role as Culture Secretary. The Business, Trade and Culture departments have been broken down into separate units, with Grant Shapps now Energy Security Secretary. The Prime Minister says the creation of a new department focused specifically on energy is so important.
It's going to mean that we can reduce people's energy bills. That's so important. It means we can produce more energy here at home, giving us independence and security. And it means we can transition to cleaner forms of energy as we hit our net zero ambitions and create jobs in the process.
Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley says the force had been too weak in rooting out rogue officers following the sentencing of former officer David Carrick. The 48-year-old has been handed 36 life sentences and has to serve a minimum of 30 years behind bars for sexual offences against a dozen women. Carrick pleaded guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, all carried out while he was serving in the force. Handing down the sentence, Mrs Justice Chima Grubb referred to what she called a spectacular downfall for a man charged with upholding the law. Sir Mark says he's determined to root out misconduct in the force. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says 3 British nationals are missing following the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, with 35 others caught up in the disaster. Turkey's president has declared a state of emergency for 3 months in the 10 cities impacted. More than 5,000 people have been killed. The first 7.8 magnitude quake hit yesterday morning, with a second major earthquake measuring 7.5 just a few hours later. Almost 6,000 buildings have been destroyed in the tremor and aftershocks. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Welcome back, ladies and gents. Loads coming your way. We are shortly going to be going live to that press conference in the search for missing Nicola Bulley. Also, I'm going to be discussing the Prevent programme as well. It's been accused of being too soft on terrorists, treating them as victims and not radical criminals. But before that, nurses across England and Wales are to continue industrial action today after the government refused to reopen negotiations. Emergency care will still be provided, but patients should expect to see disruption with scheduled appointments and operations. So quite a lot of people, really. They are striking over pay and working conditions, with the Royal College of Nursing Union demanding a wage rise of 5% above inflation. Let's go live now to North Devon District Hospital, where our South West reporter, Jeff Moody, is, along with a few other people by the sounds of it as well. And our London reporter, Lisa Hartle, is at St Thomas's Hospital. Jeff, I will start with you. I see that you are with someone.
I am indeed. I'm joined by Sue Matthews, who's a retired nurse. Sue, thank you very much for coming away from the picket line to talk to me. Over the last couple of days, I want to just drill down for a moment about this business of nurses' pay. There's going to be a lot of people watching this who say, well, that pay doesn't sound too bad. Nurses' average salary isn't too bad. And then when you add on to that the brilliant pension scheme you get, a lot of people are going to say, well, I don't earn that amount of money. What would you say to that?
Well, I think they need to know the reality of it. Nurses who've done a 3-year degree come out of university as a registered nurse, but with a £30,000 debt. They pay their tuition fees and examination fees for the whole of their training, even when they're on the wards looking after patients. So they're paying to look after patients throughout their training. Then when they qualify, they earn about £13.70 an hour. And after 5 years as a nurse on a band 5, they're earning just under £15 an hour. Now, how many people do you know working on a building site or in a non-professional capacity would want to earn less than £15 an hour? And yet people's lives are in their hands. And so it's all very well saying, what about the pension? But the pension is a contribution pension. So the staff themselves are paying for that pension. It's not just an employer pension. And it's not something that pays a mortgage and buys a house. The South West is an incredibly expensive place to live. Not because we want it to be, but because people come here on holiday, so all the landlords have taken off the long-term rentals and let them for holiday rent because they make more money. Even Airbnb has been a destroyer of the rental properties. And we've got international recruits coming in to work here, as well as people living here locally, who get 6 or 8 weeks accommodation arranged by the hospital, and then they have to go and find their own accommodation. Well, the likelihood of them being able to do that is very, very difficult. And, you know, there are specific groups in North Devon who've been trying for a long time to bring to the attention of employers, but also the councils, the problems of rental property, because there's no possibility of a mortgage on a nurse's pay. So it's not a panacea. But on the other hand, because the South West largely has a low market income, because it's farming, hospitality and so on, loads of employers use 0 hours contracts. It means that a nationally negotiated pay, like nurses and fire brigade and police, bring the local average of salary up a little bit. And so if the salary for groups of staff like that isn't sufficient for them to be able to afford to live here, they go somewhere else. And it means, ultimately, that the economy of the whole area is affected. So that's why it's important. It's important on an individual basis, because we can't recruit nurses to an area where they can't afford to live. We can't encourage people into nursing when they're going to come out with a £30,000 debt. And we can't actually persuade them that it's a worthwhile career because there is no career progression when the salary only goes up by less than £2 an hour after 5 years of expertise in saving people's lives. So that's why it's important.
Sue, brilliant. Thank you very much for so succinctly telling me how you feel about that. Thank you very much indeed. That's it from me for now. Back to you.
Jeff, thank you very much. Jeff Moody, there, our South West reporter, and our London reporter joins us now, Lisa Hartle, who's at St Thomas's Hospital. Lisa, a similar picture where you are. What's going on?
Well, day 2 of the 2-day strike that the nurses have been on. Obviously, yesterday they had the ambulance workers out as well. They're back at work today and due to strike on Friday. All the nurses behind me on the picket line have been here since early this morning. Kind of in lulls earlier on, it was really loud, lots of drumming, cars beeping their horns, trying to keep morale up and show support. There's 73 trusts that are involved in the strike today. That's around a third of them in England. And we know that so far there's been around 88,000 cancellations or appointments that have been had to be rescheduled since the NHS strikes began. So I had a little chat earlier to some of the nurses on the picket line to see what they made of it all, and this is what they had to say.
I don't think we're going to be able to quite take that just yet, but there we go. That was Lisa Hartle, who's at St Thomas's Hospital. Look, ladies and gentlemen, what do you make of this? I mean, there are definitely two different sides to this and probably quite a lot in between as well. I did speak to a nurse yesterday, and one thing that I found fascinating, as I find quite fascinating with a lot of these strikes, is how they are voted for. So it can easily seem as though every single nurse in the country has come out and voted to strike. But in reality, that's not the case at all. They have to meet a certain threshold in order to do it. And I was speaking yesterday to a particular nurse who said, well, look, hey, the majority of us voted to strike, but we weren't allowed to strike. That's simply not true. And when you really drill down into it, whilst I think the vast majority of people would be banging in favour of some kind of pay rise, some kind of deserved pay rise to help with the cost of living crisis too, not just nurses, but fire brigade staff and various different people in the public sector. When you're looking at something like 5% above the rate of inflation, the government goes, we can't afford it. And I think at times, when governments have said that, people go, all right, no, look, but you can really afford it. But I suspect that now people are maybe waking up to the fact that we can't really afford that, because if we gave everyone across the public sector the pay rise that they want, well, frankly, it would bankrupt us as a country, wouldn't it? So what do you make of all of this? Because the solution, when you really drill down into it on that, is the radical redistribution of wealth. So the only thing, really, when you ask a lot of the nurses or you ask a lot of people who are out on strike, certainly the union leaders, of course, the only realistic way of getting the kind of pay structure that they want in society is if we had radical socialism, some would argue Marxism. And do you want that? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Now, very, very shortly, we are going to be going live to a press conference in the case of Nicola Bulley, who's the missing mum and the missing dog walker. Now, she went missing 11 days ago, and the police have been using, in their words, unprecedented amount of resources to search that strip of river. The police came to the conclusion very early on, and stuck with it, that Nicola had gone in the river. OK? Now, though, people are starting to suggest that maybe that isn't the case. Even members of the family are saying they need to keep an open mind. What happened was, as well, an independent group of searchers started looking at the river using very high-tech, world-leading sonar devices. Even the particular head of that, who I am going to be talking to after this press conference, by the way, came out and said, we think that if we don't really find her today, it's actually starting to look a lot more likely that she isn't in the river and never was at all. It's important not to speculate too much, but this isn't wild speculation. It is pretty much a straightforward case of, is she in the river or not? So we're not doing anything too outlandish there whatsoever. Interesting development today as well, as people dig into this more. People are maybe saying, well, was the phone used as some kind of decoy? There have been cases in the past where someone has unfortunately been taken or gone missing, and they've ended up leaving a particular item behind to throw people off the scent. Could it well be that? We'll be talking to people about that, including the individual, the man who is in charge of searching that stretch of river right now. And yes, like I've said, we're going to go to that press conference very, very shortly. It will be interesting to see if there are any updates. Just want to dip into my inbox first, though, while we wait for that. Lots of you have been getting in touch in the inbox today. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And a lot of you kicking off about the disgraced former Met police officer David Carrick, who has been jailed today for life over, well, minimum of 30 years. He'll be 78 if he gets out bang on time, for a series of sexual offences spanning 17 years. And those offences are absolutely heinous. I will not go into the precise detail, the incredibly graphic detail of some of the things that he's done, but really, really shocking stuff. So he's been given, I just want to break this down for you, 36 life sentences for his 17-year campaign of terror and attacks against women, a minimum term set at the 30-year mark. People are saying, well, that equates to less than a year per crime, doesn't it? A lot of you saying, what do you have to do to get a full life tariff? I find it absolutely staggering that they go, well, you know, I suppose he almost gets a bit of time off because he pleaded guilty. What does it matter that he pleaded guilty? It doesn't matter to his victim, doesn't it? It doesn't matter to the lives that he's ruined. And the only reason he pleaded guilty was because he was absolutely banged to rights, wasn't it? Mary says, throw away the key for this evil man. The Met had 9 opportunities to put an end to his crimes. In doing this, they allowed him to continue. Something really needs to change within the police. I don't know about you, Mary, and everyone watching and listening to this right now. I am a big backer of the police. I am a big backer of strong law and order in this country. But then you look at the Met now. We've had the Sarah Everard case. We've had loads of cases, lists as long as your arm, haven't we? And this particular evil chap. And we hear the head of the Met, Mark Rowley, coming out and saying, well, we're going to have officers in court around 2 or 3 times a week. Well, I'm sorry, but that isn't good enough. And I am not normally one to buy into a lot of the stuff where it's like, you know, they're institutionally racist, institutionally misogynist. I don't necessarily buy the institutional element of it. But what I do buy is the fact that there are massively serious issues here, and clearly a heck of a lot of out-and-out wrong-uns have been allowed to parade their way through the Met and wider society for decades. Unaccountable. And a word, I think, as well, for the bravery of the people who have come forward now and held this man to account. Steve says, this is a bad look for the police force. You can say that again, Steve. It seems you cannot trust them to do anything. We're going to go live now to Lancashire as police give an update on the search for missing mother Nicola Bulley.
Nicola Bulley, a 45-year-old mother of 2, went missing here in St Michael's in Lancashire. It remains and always has been our priority to find Nicola as soon as possible and to bring her back to her family. Her family continues to be supported by specially trained officers who update the family daily and support them in other ways. I want to take you through the unprecedented number of inquiries that the police team has been doing in the last 11 days. We've received literally thousands of pieces of information from the public, the wider community, Nicola's family and friends, which we've been combing through diligently. This means at the moment there are around 500 active pieces of information and lines of inquiry that we're working on to try and find answers for Nicola's family. We have a team of 40 or so detectives under a senior investigating officer working daily to comb through this enormous amount of information. This is normal in a missing person inquiry and does not indicate that there is any suspicious element to this story. The inquiry team remains fully open-minded to any information that may indicate where Nicola is or what happened to her. Some of the specific pieces of information and the lines of inquiry that they've been undertaking include house to house in the village, looking at CCTV, the various pieces of dashcam that have been submitted to the inquiry, identifying and tracing and speaking to key witnesses, a number of whom have come into the inquiry and been spoken to and given valuable information. Digital and telephony, this includes Nicola's Fitbit and her mobile phone, which has been fully examined. And we've now identified around 700 vehicles that drove through the village on that morning, on the 27th of January at around 9:10, 9:15. And we're in the process of speaking to all of those drivers to try and find out if they have any dashcam footage, what they saw on that day, or anything else that may be of value to the police inquiry. We remain very grateful to all of our partners and the wider community for the help they've given. In particular, and I've mentioned some of these in the past, this includes His Majesty's Coast Guard, Lancashire Fire and Rescue, Lancaster Area and Bowland Mountain Rescue, other forces and national experts in different fields, as well as the Specialist Group International, or SGI, who have offered their assistance to the family free of charge and have been working under the direction of our local police search teams to help us. Our work around the search of the river and the riverbank continues, and this includes many pieces of different technical equipment, including sonar, pole cameras, drones, and so on, as well as specialist dogs. As I said on Friday, the river is a complex area to search. It's not a still water, it's a fast-flowing, moving water that is tidal in parts. And as acknowledged by some of the many national search advisors and experts that we've been consulting throughout, this makes it particularly complex. We have already discounted particular areas of the river, but as they are tidal, we have researched them to ensure that nothing has been washed back into those search areas. This is why you may see some areas already searched being researched for no other reason than it is tidal. We have 6 people searching the riverbanks every day. These are specially trained search who are very experienced both in missing people inquiries and in other inquiries, who are systematically and methodically searching the riverbank and the open ground. We also have a number of divers from the Regional Underwater Search Unit, and they are working with SGI and the other partners that I have mentioned to search the river itself. Throughout this investigation, as I've said, we remain fully open to any information that is credible and factual to try and trace Nicola and bring answers for her family. But it does remain our belief that Nicola sadly fell into the river and that this is a missing person inquiry. And it is important to stress that any information that comes in that indicates otherwise is being checked out all the time and negated as each inquiry comes up. We're not closed in any way to any particular line of inquiry, and we remain genuinely open to that. All these extensive inquiries, however, have so far not found anything of note. Any indications of physical objects in the river, such as natural debris, trees and the like, have been already identified by the original divers and discounted. So further sightings of that debris are only items that we already knew were on the riverbed or in the riverbank. We would ask that people in the wider community, particularly on social media and online, do not speculate as to what may have happened to Nicola. This is particularly hurtful to her family, to her children, to her partner Paul, her parents, her sister and her friends. Because it's not helpful to them, it's distressing and it's distracting for the police inquiry. Nor is it helpful if people, particularly if they come from outside of the area, take it upon themselves to take the law into their own hands by trying to, for example, break into empty property. They may mean well, they may want to help, but they can help in thinking back, if they were in the area, to what information they may have of relevance to the police. and holding the family in their thoughts. But we will not tolerate online abuse of anyone, including innocent witnesses, of members of the family and friends, of local businesses, or of criminal damage or burglary. And we will be taking a strong line on that, as you would expect. We have engaged with and worked shoulder to shoulder with a number of very specific experts, as I mentioned earlier. These include the National Crime Agency, who have reviewed all of the police investigations so far and have not identified any other lines of inquiry other than what we had already identified. Likewise, we are working with the National Search Advisor, the Police National Search Advisor, who again has not identified anything in the search strategy or the search area, the physical parameters, that we have not already explored. And I say this to reassure the local community in particular, as well as Nicola's family, that all possible lines of inquiry, search or investigation are being exhausted. I'm just going to reiterate for those who may not have caught some of the earlier detail, some of the key elements of this case that may jog somebody's memory if they were about on Friday morning, the 27th of January. We know that Nicola was last seen on the upper field next to the River Wyre here in St Michael's at 9:10. She had taken her spaniel Willow out for a walk, and CCTV that we've looked at shows that Nicola did not leave either the allotment lane exit of that riverside area, nor the Rowan Water Caravan Park, which has been discounted, nor any of the other locked or areas covered by CCTV. As I said Friday, this only leaves the path along Garstang Lane onto the A586, which is not covered by CCTV, but the more of those 700 or so vehicle drivers that we can identify and who can confirm that they have neither dashcam footage or saw anything on that morning will help us to close that very small gap. We can say with confidence, therefore, that we believe Nicola remained in the riverside area. I understand that this is frustrating for those observing the investigation when the river has been searched and Nicola has not been found. That does not mean, however, that Nicola was not in the river at some point due to the tidal flow of the river. For this reason, our search of the river and the riverbanks extends out to the sea, particularly the area from Knott End out towards Morecambe. So we continue to appeal for drivers on that morning, and I will remind people of Nicola's description, the clothing that she was wearing, and her movements on that day. Nicola is a white lady, 5'3", with shoulder-length brown hair. She speaks with an Essex accent. She was last seen wearing a knee-length black gilet jacket and underneath an Engelbert Strauss black long-sleeve jacket to the waist. She was wearing black jeans, long green walking socks tucked into her jeans, and green ankle-length wellies. She has her hair tied in a ponytail and was wearing a pale blue Fitbit. I have a small number of detail extra to the timeline that I provided on Friday that fills in some of the gaps on the morning that Nicola disappeared. They include that at 8:26 a.m, Nicola left her home address with her children, and I know there's been CCTV images from her from her doorbell footage, that have been released that may jog someone's memory. At 8:40, Nicola dropped her children off at school here in St Michael's. At 8:43, she was seen on the river path towards the gate and the bench on the lower field. At 8:47, someone who knows Nicola saw her walking along the lower field with her dog, and the two dogs briefly interacted together. At 8:53, she sent an email to her boss. At 8:59, she sent a message to a friend. At 9:01, she logged onto a Teams call. And at 9:10, we had the last confirmed sighting of Nicola on the upper field walking her dog. We know from telephony work that her phone was located on the bench at 9:20. At 9:30, the Teams call ended, but Nicola's phone stayed logged in. And at 9:33, approximately, her phone and her dog were found by another witness who doesn't know her. I would ask people to dig back into their memory 11 days ago to that morning and to phone us on 101, or if there's a sighting of Nicola, on 999, or I do now have an email address for direct contact into the investigation room for us to receive email. Details of this are published on our website. It is Nicola Bully, spelt E-Y, investigation, all one word, Nicola Bully investigation at lancashire.police.uk. Nicola Bully investigation at lancashire.police.uk. I just want to end by holding Nicola's family in our thoughts. This is an agonising time for them, particularly her two little girls who are only 6 and 9. It's very, very distressing for them not to have found Nicola, and to ask everyone to remain constructive, cooperative with the inquiry, not to do anything that would thwart us and hold us back from trying to find Nicola as quickly as possible. To remain respectful to each other in the search, that's including the inquiry team and the local people for whom this is also very difficult. This is a tight-knit community of people who have come out in force, as have our partners, and I would thank them again very much for their work so far. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Last night, your independent expert, Peter Fording, told our channel that he did not believe that Nicola was in the water. He said he believes the phone could be a decoy, that there could be third-party involvement. How helpful is that for you when the police is saying its hypothesis is that she somehow fell into the water, and yet you've got part of the team investigating this case basically contradicting?
Well, I thank SGI for the help that they've given to the team. As I said before, our search has not found Nicola in the river, and then a research in parts by SGI found the same. That does not mean, as I said a few minutes ago, that Nicola has not been in the river. And in the light of other inquiries being discounted from the investigation so far, although we are keeping an absolutely open mind to anything new, then clearly our main belief is that Nicola did fall into the river. Clearly, Mr. Fording isn't included within all the investigation detail, any more than the members of the public are that I'm briefing through these sorts of press conferences. So we would ask that we be allowed time to continue with those inquiries and to release to the public only what is relevant for them at that time. Thank you. I'll just take another question. Thank you.
Superintendent Riley, it's the 12th day that Nicola Bully has been missing. Every day concerns will increase, no doubt, for everyone. How confident are you that your team will find Nicola alive?
It is 12 days since Nicola's been missing, and clearly a 15-kilometre stretch of the river is a complex, difficult and moving body of water to search. I do believe that we will find Nicola, but the nature is a powerful force, changes our parameters constantly, which is why we are bringing in the number of experts that we have, so that all the best brains and trained people in the country can give us the absolute best chance of finding Nicola. Thank you. Thank you.
You mentioned how 700 vehicles that came through. Well, there we have it. Lancashire Police news conference there and heading up the investigation. In the centre of your screen, if you're watching on television, Superintendent Sally Riley talking about Nicola Bulley, 45 years old, last seen walking her dog by the river in St Michael's on the Wye in Lancashire 11 painful days ago. That missing persons inquiry is still ongoing, according to Superintendent Riley. And she republished a timeline with some extra detail on it that we hadn't been aware of before, saying that at 9:10 was the last confirmed sighting, 9:33 the moment when her dog Willow and the phone was found on the bench, still connected to a conference call. She asked people to call police on 101 or even 999 if there's a sighting of Nicola Bulley, if memories are jogged by this latest press release. And she said there's also a specialist email address that people can now send an email in on, and it is Nicola Bulley, all one word, Nicola Bulley Investigation, all one word, no gaps, Nicola Bulley Investigation at lancashirepolice.uk. So Superintendent Sally Riley there still saying they're treating this as a missing persons inquiry and urging people not to speculate themselves, however good their intentions are, online in helping the police solve this. They have all the help they need, but still they're appealing to members of the public to come forward with any new information. Patrick?
Thank you very, very much. Now, look, ladies and gentlemen, very shortly, in a matter of moments, I'm going to be speaking to Peter Falding. Now, Peter is the individual who's the dive expert. He's in charge of this kind of independent dive team. What is fascinating is that he's also gone out of his way to contradict, really, what the police have been saying. He is quite sceptical as to whether or not Nicola actually did go into the river. He did identify 7 areas that, for him, don't add up, and I'm going to obviously be talking to him about that. Just to give you a couple of them now. The mobile phone on the bench. We all know that Nicola's phone was still connected to a work conference call. He is, well, at least considering the idea that it might have been used as some kind of decoy. He's also quite sceptical about the dog issue as well. Nicola's dog apparently didn't seem particularly distressed. He said that he's been to incidents in the past. In fact, he was speaking to us right here on GB News at the weekend. He's been to incidents in the past where the dogs have been very, very distressed when an owner has gone missing like this. He's also raised questions as to why the area was not initially sealed off, why it wasn't sealed off particularly quickly. He said there's no police tape up there, the obvious concerns about that. And he is of the opinion that despite there being a tidal flow in this river, that if Nicola had been in the river, she wouldn't have gone particularly far. Of course, the police have a very different view on that. One thing that I'm keen to get stuck into as well is the idea of the fact that Nicola was wearing a Fitbit. The police just confirmed there that Nicola Bulley was supposedly wearing a Fitbit when she went missing. And in the past, Fitbits have been used to be able to tell exactly when somebody has had a change in heartbeat, for example. Clearly, there doesn't appear to be much information forthcoming that, and I think a lot of people find that quite odd. So shortly, I will be talking to the individual who is in charge of that independent dive inquiry, Peter Falding. He'll be live with me very, very shortly, so make sure you stay tuned for that. We're going to move away from it now. We'll wait for Peter to come up, and we're going to talk about, well, another very distressing case, actually, because the victims of serial rapist former police officer David Carrick have been praised for their bravery, as he was earlier sentenced to 36 life terms for his crimes. Judge Mrs. Justice Chima Grubb said that the voice of courage could not be denied while handing Carrick a sentence of at least 30 years behind bars at Southwark Crown Court earlier today. The 48-year-old is one of the country's worst sex offenders. He joined the Met in 2001. He pleaded guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, some multiple incidents, meaning they relate to at least 85 separate offences, including at least 71 sexual offences and 48 rapes. This afternoon, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, described his crimes as a scar on our police, adding that it is vital we uncover how he was able to wear the uniform for so long. GBNews' Home and Security Editor Mark White is at Southwark Crown Court for us now. Thank you very much, Mark. Yes, an absolutely shocking case and, well, a lengthy sentence. Some people saying it's not enough. I suppose some people will think nothing is enough, really.
Yeah, I think so. And for his victims, you can forgive them for believing that nothing is enough in this case and that life should mean a whole life tariff. But it didn't cross that threshold as far as the judge was concerned. Of course, none of his victims were killed by him. And he did plead guilty before this came to trial. All that results in a discount, clearly, to the sentence that he would normally have been given. But it is 36 life sentences. Doesn't really mean anything other than one life sentence because they all run concurrently. But it's this minimum tariff, the minimum term that he must serve behind bars before he's even considered for parole, and that is almost 31 years. So this man will be, if he lives that long, almost 80 years old before they're even considering the possibility that he could be released from prison. As far as his victims are concerned, well, of course, there was a dozen victims that came forward and formed the centre of this prosecution, but the police and prosecutors believe that there may well be more victims out there who haven't come forward yet, who might now feel empowered to come forward, having seen this man brought to justice. And a little earlier, we heard from both the senior investigating officer in this case from Hertfordshire Police and from the Crown Prosecution Service, of course, talking about just what an awful crime that, or set of crimes that this man committed, but also urging people to come forward if they want to do so now.
I'm extremely relieved and pleased to be standing here today, knowing that as a result of the courage of the victims and the relentless hard work of my team, a serious and prolific sex offender is now safely behind bars. This has been one of the longest and most challenging investigations that I've ever been involved in. It is a testament to my officers' unwavering and dedicated pursuit for justice that David Carrick has been handed 36 life sentences today. I'm truly humbled by the bravery of the victims. Each one was prepared to live their horrendous ordeal and face Carrick in court. I would also like to thank the Crown Prosecution team at Thames Chiltern. We've worked side by side with the exceptional team of lawyers since October 2021, building a strong and compelling case. Our investigation does not stop here, however, and we've set up a special reporting portal to allow people to continue to share information with us. This portal will remain open and details can be found on the Hertfordshire Police website. I would urge anyone who thinks they've been a victim of David Carrick to come forward. We still want to hear from you and we will support you. As a serving police officer, David Carrick has brought shame on the profession and was not fit to wear the uniform. But I hope that our determination to get justice for the victims in this case will go some way to reassuring the public that nobody is above the law and we will bring people like David Carrick to justice.
Today is about recognising the outstanding bravery of the victims. It often takes courage for anyone to come forward and report a rape, but in this case, to overcome the mental and physical oppression they endured may have felt insurmountable at times. We've heard the accounts of women who suffered at Carrick's hands. He took away their control, their right to choose, their freedom, in some cases both physically and mentally. We cannot undo the pain and anguish that they have endured, but I hope that they can take this first step in rebuilding their lives knowing that he can't harm them or any other woman.
Well, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, has said that the crimes committed by David Carrick are a scar on policing. She wants to know how he was able to continue wearing the uniform for as long as he did. That's certainly something the Metropolitan Police will be anxious to get to the bottom of as they continue, according to the Commissioner, to root out corrupt police officers. I've been looking back at this very disturbing case and this officer who abused his position in the most appalling manner. As a Metropolitan Police officer, PC David Carrick was supposed to protect the public. Instead, he preyed on them, using his status as an armed officer to trick, control and silence his victims. A serial offender, he admitted to a staggering total of almost 50 offences, including 24 separate counts of rape. At Scotland Yard, the force may be under new management, but it is an all too familiar picture. A humiliating act of public contrition amid promises that the Met is focused on cleaning up its act.
We in policing have failed. He should not have been a police officer. There were many signs that we should have joined together. He should have been rooted out during his career as a police officer. It's upsetting to be stood here talking about this, and I apologise again to the victims, and indeed I apologise to the women of London.
PC Carrick worked as a firearms officer in the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, whose officers guard key buildings like Parliament, embassies and Downing Street. It's the unit where PC Wayne Couzens, another corrupt officer, served. He went on to kidnap, rape and murder marketing executive Sarah Everard in March 2021. The court heard how PC Carrick repeatedly humiliated his victims, locking some women in the understairs cupboard at his home here in Stevenage, or forcing them to clean his house naked, referring to his victims as slaves and telling them when they could eat and sleep. His crimes went undetected by the force he worked for, despite his behaviour being brought to the attention of senior officers on 9 separate occasions. In 2000, Carrick was accused of burglary and sending abusive messages, but the next year he passed the vetting procedures to join the Metropolitan Police. While serving, he was first accused of harassment and assault in 2002. He came to their attention again 2 years later after an alleged domestic incident. Despite a string of other allegations, none of them proven, he passed fresh vetting checks in 2017. In July 2021, he was placed on restricted duties after being arrested on suspicion of rape. But 2 months later, those restrictions were lifted after the charges were dropped. It was only in October that year that Carrick was finally suspended after prosecutors charged him following another allegation of rape at this hotel in St Albans by a woman he'd met on a dating app.
An absolute shocking case, this one.
Policing analyst Graham Wetton said this appalling breach of trust underlines the urgent need to change the standards and the culture within the UK's biggest police force.
This was a dreadful case, and it has to be a priority for the new Commissioner and the management team to address the issues with the Met, restore trust and confidence by looking at any offending that's gone on and root these people out of policing.
PC David Carrick's crimes have had a devastating impact on the lives of his victims. But the failure of his commanding officers to act far sooner has destroyed the trust of many others within the wider community. Mark White, GB News at Scotland Yard.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm joined now by Stephen Roberts, who's former Director of Professional Standards at the Met Police. Look, thank you very much for coming on the show. I've got to ask, were you Director of Professional Standards at the Met Police when David Carrick was there?
No, I wasn't, in fact. No, I'd retired by then.
OK, all right, OK, fair enough. Look, how was this guy allowed to slip through the net? I mean, he was being brought to the Met's attention in 2002. I do understand that you were there until 2009, were you not?
Yes, but although by that stage I was working in training new officers.
Fair enough.
The reason that he was able to slip through the net, as you put it, two basic issues here. The first is that police regulations mean that police regulations which are statutory mean that you can't simply either suspend an officer or even get him removed from the force merely on the basis of an allegation. You have to have credible evidence, and in order to have somebody removed from the service altogether, you actually have to have him either convicted of a criminal offence, and then you can get rid of him very easily, thankfully, or you have to have sufficient to put him in front of a police discipline board, which can then sack him. But it's not as straightforward as we would all wish that it was. The second issue, though, where I think the Met is at fault, is that when you have a succession of allegations coming forward about an individual, what needs to happen is that that individual is thoroughly investigated to try and make sure that there is the evidence available on which he can be suspended and on which he can ultimately be sacked. And that's where I think the Metropolitan Police failed on this occasion.
When you look at the fact that he was part of the same group, as it were, as Wayne Couzens, who was the murderous rapist in the Sarah Everard case, it does lead one to wonder whether the job itself, being an armed police officer and the power of that, attracts a certain type of man. What do you think?
Yes, that is indeed true. It's well known from research, not only in this country, but in America as well, that whilst the vast majority of recruits to the police service are well-intentioned people of integrity, it also does attract people who want to exercise power, and that the exercise of power is the thing that attracts them to the police service. That's why you have to have very high standards of vetting. That's why you have to investigate people against whom there are allegations building up. As regards the diplomatic protection group, yes, Couzens was also a member of that group, but so also was a gentleman called Keith Palmer, who lost his life defending Parliament from a terrorist wielding a knife. So I think it's rather unfair to brand that department as the home of perverts.
Well, exactly, and it really is very, very unfortunate. I certainly, back the police force to the hilt, and I'm a strong believer in law and order, and the vast majority of our viewers are. But when you hear the likes of Mark Rowley coming out and going, well, you can expect 2 or 3 coppers in court every single week for the rest of the year, it is increasingly difficult to start criticising people who say, oh, it's institutionally this or institutionally that. And I hate lobbing those things about. Just very lastly, this might seem completely outlandish, but in light of some of the cases that we've got, in order to be absolutely double sure that there are not this many out-and-out wrong-uns in a police force, could we start doing things like lie detector tests for people? Could we not start doing things like absolutely mandatory forensic looks through their hard drives and all sorts? I mean, this chap was supposedly watching incredibly violent porn. I mean, that might be a useful indicator that he's got some pretty nasty desires.
There are all sorts of measures that could be taken, but we do have to bear in mind that even police officers have civil rights. They have a right and an expectation of privacy. So there are limits as to what is possible legally, and there are limits to what is ethical. However, where you've got somebody who has to undergo vetting for national security reasons, that can be made a condition of their vetting that they are in effect forced into giving permission for that sort of event. But that will require very large numbers of people, skilled investigators, in order to address that. Now, Mark Rowley, the Commissioner, is already diverting good detectives with experience and integrity into the Professional Standards Department, and that's quite right. But there is a limit to how many people can be taken off from policing to protect the public into internal professional standards work.
Stephen, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Wonderful insight, that. Stephen Roberts there, former Director of Professional Standards at the Met Police. And he was just reacting to that sickening David Carrick case that we've been talking about throughout the course of the day. We're moving away from that now, though, and this morning eyes were on what would happen to Dominic Raab in Sunak's cabinet reshuffle, but it seems it will remain in post until the investigation into alleged bullying concludes. But the Prime Minister has been shaking some things up in Whitehall today. He's created, get this, a new department for energy security and net zero, with Grant Shapps at the helm, which he hopes will help reduce household bills and cut emissions. Obviously, a lot of people pointing out that 2 of those things there could be kind of mutually exclusive, really. How can you have energy security and also net zero? Let's speak now to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. He's in Westminster. Darren, to be fair, in many cases, a relatively, well, non-dramatic cabinet reshuffle, you could say.
Yeah, indeed, Rishi Sunak promised that politics was going to be relatively boring. Well, he didn't, but some of his supporters have done since he became Prime Minister, and today's maybe a sign of that. It all went pretty smoothly, to be fair to the government. These things aren't necessarily terribly easy, particularly when actually you're keeping your cards close to your chest, and also you're changing not just the personnel, but indeed some of the government departments as well. I think there's a few things to take away from it. First of all, no one got sacked, so that does make things easier when you're essentially creating jobs rather than having to force people out of government. Second of all, you're right, this department that Grant Shapps is now going to lead up, which is effectively the department that Gordon Brown created way back in 2007-8. That is the Department of Energy and Climate Change, it was called then. Now it's Energy Security and Net Zero. But you're right, it's about sending that signal to a large degree that energy security is really important, but also that trying to meet that target of net zero by the middle of the century is also important to this government, though it must be said not everyone in the Conservative Party shares that view. Kevin Badenoch, another good example of changes today. She's seen her remit massively increase from not just trade, but also business too, taking up an old chunk of Grant Shapps' old department. And then we've got this new department based around science and technology. Again, another signal from the government. Rishi Sunak's talked about this before, that he wants to ensure that science is at the heart of the future in terms of making Britain a science superpower. What is notable today is that we've got a new Conservative chairman as well. Greg Hands takes over from Nadeem Zahawi. He's going to be a safe pair of hands, I might suggest. A good campaigner, well liked in the Conservative Party, Patrick, but he's got a hell of a struggle, an uphill task to try and change things around, not least ahead of those local elections in a couple of months. And finally, one person who's not left government today, or indeed changed jobs, is that of Dominic Raab. The allegations, the investigation hasn't got away. Prime Minister clearly determined to hold on to him. Of course, he denies any allegations of bullying. It may well be found that he's not been involved in that, but the Prime Minister again sending in another signal that he's not going to throw cabinet ministers under the bus without, he would argue, due process.
Well, there we go. Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor, who is in Westminster. Now, coming up, ladies and gentlemen, trapped earthquake victims in Turkey and Syria are reportedly sending voice notes from inside the rubble that they're trapped in. Trapped earthquake victims are still out there, and we believe that around 3 of them are British as well. I am also very shortly going to be going to Peter Faulding, who is in charge now of the latest dive operation in the search for missing Nicola Bulley. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We're getting all set up with Peter. Lots of questions remain unanswered there. I'm hopefully going to put them all to him. I'll bring you the latest on all of that very, very shortly. I'll be back in a tick.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride. Oh, she's on it today! Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gents. Now, 4 crew members from Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service have arrived in Turkey to join a team of search and rescue specialists. The Foreign Secretary has also confirmed 3 British nationals are missing, and it comes as Turkey's President Erdogan declared a 3-month state of emergency in 10 of the country's provinces. The two quakes struck yesterday and took place 9 hours apart, measuring at a whopping 7.8 in Turkey and 7.5 in Syria. That, of course, is on the Richter scale. Meanwhile, a third tremor struck today, measuring 5.7. Approximately 5,000 people have died so far, with around 20,000 injured. That number, of course, both numbers, in fact, expected to rise. And, in fact, sadly, the number of dead is expected potentially to reach as high as 20,000 itself. Neighbouring Syria, they're reeling from 2 consecutive earthquakes, the region's strongest in nearly a century. Devastating swathes, of course, of territory. Now, for those of you watching on TV, you can see a young boy being pulled from the rubble, and that is in northern Syria. International aid efforts are increasing, and the UK is sending search and rescue teams to the area. I've just said there are a few going from Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue. The US and South Korea, they're also sending aid, and international appeals for help are ongoing. Well, joining me now is Dr. Carmen Solana, reader in volcanology and risk communication. Thank you very much. Look, great to have you on the show. I suppose when the dust settles on an incident like this, for want of a better phrase, people say, was there any way of predicting something like this?
Well, we're not right now in the position to be able to predict. Science has advanced a lot, and we understand how stress accumulates and transfers from one fault into another. But we don't know when it's going to happen. We know it's likely, we know which faults are active, but the question of the million, I suppose, is when, and that we're not in the position to answer at the moment.
Do we know exactly what's happened here? Look, you're the expert on this kind of stuff. It's probably at this point that I should throw my hands up and say I wasn't necessarily always the best in class when it came to geography and certainly volcanology and all of this stuff. So what has exactly happened here? Because these are massive quakes and aftershocks.
Well, all that area, all of Turkey, Syria, a lot of the Middle East is a well-known area of frequent and very large and very destructive earthquakes. What happens is that the movement of the plates has been creating an accumulation of energy that has been released very suddenly and very shallowly, which is very important. And the shaking of the ground has affected all that very large area where buildings haven't been able to withstand the tremors. The problem, I mean, these two earthquakes respond precisely to a long time with energy accumulating in this fault and not being released, and this means that this means a really big problem for all these zones that have all this energy, and they have all these potentially large earthquakes that has happened in this case and will carry on occurring. We don't know when, but within that fault line.
Indeed. And just to reiterate as well, do you expect there to be more tremors taking place shortly, the aftermath of this? Do we think this is it now?
Well, typically after very large earthquakes, you have a period of aftershocks, of tremors, and it settles. And we're hoping that this will be the case in this earthquake. So if things follow the normal trends, the most frequent trends, they should be dying down, and the ground should be stabilizing, and therefore this should be, yes, they should be finishing now.
Dr. Carmen, thank you very much. Dr. Carmen Solana there, reader in volcanology and risk communication, just reacting to the fact that there have been those whopping great big earthquakes both in Syria and in Turkey. In fact, there are live images that we're bringing you just now, and that's in Turkey, of a rescue operation taking place there. Quick Google, ladies and gentlemen, you'll find numerous different charities that you can donate to. And as well, it's worth noting that 3 Brits are missing as a result of those quakes. I have got a lot coming your way very, very shortly, because in the last half hour, Lancashire Police has given an update, if you want to call it that really, on their search for Nicola Bully, the missing mother, the missing dog walker. They sought to reassure both Nicola's family and the public that they are still exploring all possible lines of inquiry, as the mother of 2 has been missing now for 11 days. I am going to be speaking before 6 p.m, hopefully a lot sooner than that actually, to the head diver at a private company which is searching the water. It's Peter Faulding. He says that numerous different elements to this do not add up, and I think the vast majority of us are inclined to agree with him as well. What about the Fitbit? What about the dog? All sorts going on there. GBViews at gbnews.uk. I'll bring you the very latest on the Nicola Bulley case, and also on top of that as well, I'm going to be revealing exactly how, it's been accused anyway, how our Prevent scheme is, believe it or not, treating radical Islamists as the victims. You couldn't make it up. Soft Touch Britain. I'll be back in a tick after the headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. The Prime Minister has revealed his new cabinet today following a reshuffle. He's also created 4 new departments. Greg Hands takes over as the new Conservative Party chairman after Nadeem Zahawi was sacked. Kemi Badenoch is the new Business and Trade Secretary. Lucy Fraser has become the Culture Secretary, taking over from Michelle Donnellan, who's been made Science and Technology Secretary. The Business, Trade and Culture departments have been broken down into separate units, with Grant Shapps now Energy Security Secretary. Well, also in the news today, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has apologised to women in London for police failings after the sentencing of former officer David Carrick. The 48-year-old has been handed 36 life sentences and will serve a minimum of 30 years for sexual offences against a dozen women. Carrick pleaded guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, all carried out while he was a serving officer in the force. And the Foreign Secretary says 3 British people are missing following the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. James Cleverly also told the Commons today 35 others have been caught up in the disaster, which has killed more than 5,000 people. Turkey's president has declared a state of emergency for 3 months in 10 cities impacted. And Lancashire police say they still believe Nicola Bulley fell into the River Wyre while she was out walking her dog 11 days ago. The underwater search for the mother of 2 continues. The force is also investigating around 500 lines of inquiry, although so far has not found any evidence of criminality. Her partner has issued a fresh appeal saying her 2 daughters desperately miss their mum and need her back. Those are the latest news headlines. We'll have more news for you in just a moment.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you. The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, nurses across England and Wales are to continue industrial action today after the government refused to reopen negotiations. Emergency care, they're saying, will still be provided, but patients should expect to see disruption with scheduled appointments and operations. They're striking over pay and working conditions, and the Royal College of Nursing Union is demanding a wage rise of 5% above inflation. There are very much two sides to this. A lot of people are saying, well, they've got a gold-plated pension. That pension would bring the average annual salary of a nurse up to around the £62,000 a year mark. That's a lot of money. Can some deal not be done? We were banging on about this yesterday. Can some deal not be done about this, where they get more upfront pay? Would that help with recruitment? Would that help with retention? Some people are still saying, and to be honest with you, I'm inclined to be one of them, this is a desperately bleak situation, and I feel for nurses, and I would be banging in favour of some kind of pay rise for them. But walking out on the job, I'm sorry, I don't really care whether or not you tell me that patients are being protected and stuff. We're seeing a backlog of people, of routine operations, etc., being cancelled, and I think morally there are serious, serious question marks to be had over all of that. Let's go live now to North Devon District Hospital, where our South West reporter Jeff Moody has been diligently stationed for us for a couple of days. Jeff, I can still see people behind you with placards, the tooting of horns. Presumably they're not patients.
Absolutely. A lot of what you have just said, Patrick, these guys would disagree with quite strongly. I've interviewed everybody on that picket line over the last couple of days that wants to be interviewed, so I'm afraid now you've just got me summing up what has been said to me. I get a strong sense from these people, this is from listening to their stories over the last couple of days, that firstly they're angry, a strong sense of anger, that they feel they have no choice other than to stand out here. None of them want to stand out here in the cold. They want to be in there in the hospital doing their work. So a strong sense that how has it come to this? Also a sense of pride. A lot of them saying, look, I want to be able to look my grandchildren in the eyes when the time comes and say that I did something to support and help the NHS move forward. A lot of people are saying that to me, that they're proud that they're taking a stand for the future, because they say to me it's not just the NHS today, this is talking about the NHS tomorrow and next year and in the future, and it's a service we're all going to use at one point or another. A lot of them talking to me about a sense of frustration at having to live on £13 an hour. That's the sort of the basic minimum wage for a junior nurse. And they were saying, well, you know, you've got your student loans, there's also parking. Of course, they have to pay for parking at their place of work. Sometimes if they have to go into a visitor's car park, that's £5 a day. They're also talking to me about how difficult it is for nurses and junior NHS staff to get a mortgage. They were saying that home ownership, you know, in a world where they're choosing between heating and eating, owning your own home just doesn't come into it. And they're saying that, particularly in somewhere like North Devon, this is a problem that Devon and Cornwall and many other places face, this issue of second homes, rich Londoners that decide to get a second home down in the countryside and use it a couple of times a year, pushing prices up, reducing the availability of the housing stock. And that's having a real impact on them too. But also a strong sense of frustration about the way this strike is being portrayed by the media. A lot of them saying to me, look, it's not fair to say this is morally wrong. It's not fair to say that people's lives are being put at risk, because inside that hospital, they're telling me it's more staff than ever before. There's agency staff galore. Every now and again, somebody on the picket line will go and take some donuts in to the agency staff and make sure they're doing a good enough job. They're saying that nobody's lives are being put at risk. And finally, a sense of determination. This is the last strike that's planned at the moment. Hopefully now the government will sit down with the unions and thrash out some kind of deal. But they're saying if that doesn't happen, they will still picket, they will still go on strike until they get their wishes.
OK, Jeff, thank you very much. Jeff Moody there, who is our South West reporter. He's been, like I've said, diligently standing at the picket lines. Look, ladies and gentlemen, I've got to be honest with you, when it comes to the issue of home ownership and stuff, well, join the club. Frankly, the vast majority of people who are under the age of 30, some even older, around the UK, pretty much in a lot of professions anyway. The vast majority of professions are struggling to get on the housing ladder at the moment. That is just the way it is. I keep hearing about nurses going to food banks as well. We are yet to see any kind of coherent data when it comes to people in the public sector going to food banks. A lot of people do raise strong objections to the idea that nurses should be given a pay rise 5% above inflation in the current economic climate. You would then have to, of course, give pay rises to everyone in the public sector. And I think whilst people are banging in favour of some public sector pay rises, not necessarily for others as well. And when it comes to them going, well, actually, we're not putting any patients at risk whatsoever, I, well, frankly, don't believe it. Because how can a load of nurses out on picket lines not be putting patient safety at risk? And in fact, I'm reading a headline here. Deadlock over NHS pay putting patients in danger. Chief nurses warn. Well, yeah. I mean, if the NHS is better serviced by virtue of all of those people being standing out on a picket line, then goodness gracious me, what's the point in them to begin with? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Anyway, there could be some economic good news. Hey, here we go, on the horizon, as energy bills look set to drop later this year. The Resolution Foundation has said that the average bill should fall by £2,200 by October, below the £2.5 paid under the current price cap. The reduction's set to last through the winter, as bills will average £2,400 between this April and next. That's a reduction, supposedly, on the previous forecast of £3,000. Joining me now to discuss this is former CEO of Energy UK. It's Angela Knight. OK, all right, so potentially a bit of good news. Energy bills now are dropping. I will no longer have to wheel out the phrases of poor people having to, you know, choose between heating and eating, will I?
Well, I hope not, because it's absolutely true, you know, that when we look at those forecasts and we look to see what's happening, that the prices are coming down the wholesale market, and that feeds directly through to us, to the retail and domestic market. But, you know, what has happened as well over this last year, 18 months, as prices are going up and up and up, that countries, of which we're one, have actually, you know, sat back and thought a lot more seriously about, have we got enough gas? What are we doing about energy security? Are there changes that we need to make to how we operate? Probably one of the biggest changes is, of course, Germany, who had to swing over from being so dependent on Russia to filling up its gas from all around the world. And the consequence of that was actually they were one of the big drivers up of the wholesale price. But now they're starting to work out better in the sense of they're building importing ports, importing of the LNG, you know, the tankers of liquefied gas, which they didn't have any importing ports of those before, but now they're getting those in place. That helps. The actual consumption, there's been a cut in consumption across Europe. That helps, and that cut can stay. And of course, some of the nuclear power in France, which was down very substantially for a whole raft of reasons, that's now back up and running. So we're looking at a better picture. What we've got to do here in this country is now focus more on our own energy security and be absolutely clear as to what actions we are taking so we can't be caught by an international problem to that extent that we have the last few months this year.
I get it, but we shouldn't have been caught. People have been talking about this. It's the obvious thing has been staring us in the eye. If you allow somebody else, and that particular individual or those particular individuals are not very nice people, to have your economic security in a vice, then you should not be surprised when those nasty people turn off the taps. We have recently just seen, today in fact, that we now have Grant Shapps, who is head of energy security and net zero. Can we do both of those things at the same time? Surely not.
Well, you can, but you've got to get your timescale right and you've got to get your plan. The answer isn't just go and build more wind farms, because that is manifestly, you know, isn't going to work because the wind doesn't blow all the time. Today it's not windy, it's cold. What are you going to rely on? So the way that we will get to net zero is a sensible timescale in which we build our backup, and we also build the base load, which is predominantly has to be nuclear for low carbon. At the same time, we don't just build renewables. We also have got to develop more technology, such as you store electricity by using it in surplus times to split water and collect the hydrogen, and all those sorts of techniques. But you're not going to have that tomorrow. You're not going to have that this decade. you know, this is taking the next 20, 25 years to get the programme right, to do the investment at a pace which people can afford, and for heaven's sake, move the emotions to one side. I mean, it's no good us pouring hate and scorn onto the big energy companies, the ones who extract oil and gas, simply because an international market is where they play. They bring the oil and gas out of the ground right away around the world. There's a shortage globally, so the price went up. It's not their fault, for heaven's sake. So instead of bashing them, and they are paying a load of tax to us, there needs to be a proper programme of which more gas locally is going to have to be part, because gas is a very good interim fuel, and just powering up gas power stations is a thing you can do quickly, and you have to do things quickly when the wind stops blowing or the sun stops shining. So that programme is essential.
Exactly. Angela, thank you very much. Angela Knight there, former CEO of Energy UK. I think doing somewhat to expose a little bit, frankly, of the madness that's going on around at the minute. Oh, we hate rich people, we hate the wealthy people, we hate these big oil and energy giants. But we need the rich people, and we need, of course, the oil and energy giants to be pumping tax into our economy. We've got to be net zero. We cannot anger that Swedish teenager, can we? No, we cannot make Greta angry. Absolutely not. We couldn't possibly do that kind of thing. All right, then, fine. Well, what happens when Putin turns the taps off, or our friends in the Middle East decide that they don't particularly like us anymore? Oh, we've got to fire up the coal plants, have we? OK, all right. And the same people who hate the coal plants, I suspect, were the ones who would have actually been dead against Thatcher for closing the coal pits to begin with. It is absolute madness, and we need people actually to be kept warm in their own homes today, as opposed to, like I've said, appeasing a load of people who glue themselves to things, probably because they've got a whole host of other issues going on in their own head. Anyway, former First Minister Alex Salmond has criticised his mentee, Nicola Sturgeon, saying that her gender nonsense has set Scottish independence back years. Mr Salmond also called the pursuit of her controversial gender bill and lack of clarity over transgender rapist Isla Bryson self-indulgent. Support for the campaign for independence does seem to be falling, as a new YouGov poll of Scottish voters shows that those backing independence has dropped 6%. Among dead-sided, easy for me to say, voters, compared to the same results for December. Joining me now is columnist at The Scotsman and former MSP, is Brian Monteith. Brian, great stuff. Thank you very much. Has Nicola Sturgeon actually done us all a favour, frankly, and in exposing the old transgender madness, maybe put that to bed and also put Scottish independence to bed as well?
Well, I believe that she is actually now an existential threat to the SNP and their independence cause. So bad is her reputation becoming as someone wishing to, in a sense, defend the rights of a rapist to decide he is a woman after he's been charged on 2 counts and, of course, eventually found guilty, that her personal ratings are also falling in that same poll. And that is going to tarnish undoubtedly tarnish the SNP and the independence cause. And if the SNP members, the SNP politicians had any sense, they would be seeking to change their leader, because I think that without changing that leader, they've had their Ratner moment, and they're so tarnished that their votes will fall and damage them.
Yeah. Do you think Nicola Sturgeon will look back on this now and think, you know what, I have chosen to die on a hill after a long political career, where, to be fair on her, she has navigated the game of human chess that is the thick end of politics, and a political career that at times has brought her tremendous success. She could have had it all. She could well potentially have pushed for some kind of second referendum. She could well have potentially won that. And now, because she has decided, in my view, to back a cause that there's no way she can possibly genuinely believe in, that will be the thing that brings her down.
Well, Patrick, humility is not Nicola Sturgeon's middle name. Try and find her apologising for any of the mistakes in her policies, and she has had dreadful success, a complete lack of it in education, many failures in transport, ferries and railways, in dual carriageways for roads that need upgraded. We can go on, and her political record is poor. but she is not a healer. She does not work in building consensus or harmony. She divides the country. And as such, she has put people against her. And this transgender bill was not supported by the people. And as a result, she is now feeling the wrath when she actually supports the rights of a double rapist to choose to become a woman after being charged as a man.
Yeah, Nicola Sturgeon cannot tell us what a woman is. She cannot really tell us what a trans person is. I think it used to be quite a narrow definition, and now it incorporates people who are, goodness gracious me, cross-dressers, non-binary, etc. What I find fascinating is she can't even tell us what's going on in her own home, actually, Brian, because Nicola Sturgeon can't recall, if indeed it is her own home, Nicola Sturgeon can't recall when she found out that her husband had lent £100,000 to the SNP. She's saying, well, that's his own money. I can tell you what, right now, OK, I have a fiancé, if £100,000, I don't care if it's her money or not, if 100,000 quid of it went somewhere, I'd like to have known about it.
Well, Nicola Sturgeon is where she is because she has her finger on the pulse of what is happening around her. Some might call her a control freak. The idea that she can be the leader of a political party and that her husband, who stays in the same home as her and is the chief executive, does not discuss with her that he is making a personal loan, that she does not have some fiduciary duty to know what's going on, that he doesn't have some fiduciary duty to tell her with such a huge amount, £107,000 of money after tax. That's personal wealth within the family is being put into the SNP. One might ask why by her husband, and she can't remember the details. I mean, that is just unbelievable. There's no credibility in that answer. And yet again, it's an example of how there is no humility and no willingness to accept that she's wrong.
She's really testing now, I think, the parameters of how much Scottish people want independence. Because if it is a question of, OK, you want independence, and, hey, I'm a Brexiteer, believe in the right to self-determination, national sovereignty, all of this stuff, but if you want it at the cost of allowing male rapists into female prisons, and you want it at the cost of having a lady in charge who doesn't seem to be even able to run her own home, let alone a country, and a variety of different issues going on there with your education system and your healthcare service. Brian, I suspect that people who are on the fence in Scotland might start to have a look at Queen Nick and think, actually, time you abdicated.
Well, I certainly think that there are some able people in the SNP. They're not the best supported party in Scotland for nothing. And were there to be a front runner, were there to be someone that was to come forward and say, I'm sorry, Nicola, but your time is over. We need to reboot the party. I think the change could be very quick. You see how quickly Liz Truss was got rid of. I think if Nicola Sturgeon was pushed, she would fall even quicker.
I've got to cut you off, Brian. Sorry about that. I could talk to you all day. Brian Monteith, the Scotsman and former MSP. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys on GB News. Loads more to come. I will be speaking to Peter Faulding, the diver who's been searching for missing mum, Nicola Bulley. Stay tuned.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. And coming up, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has described the crimes of rapist Metropolitan Police Officer David Carrick as a scar on our police force. The 48-year-old will serve at least 30 years behind bars, as a judge said that he used his job to take monstrous advantage of women, as he was sentenced earlier today. We'll have the latest with our Home and Security editor, Mark White, on that. And yes, it's been Cabinet Reshuffle Day, although not particularly dramatic one, no sackings. There you go. Bizarrely, there is now a new position, though, of energy security and net zero. You heard me right. How on earth can we have energy security and net zero? We also have a new Tory party chairman and a new deputy Tory party chairman, which I think is more interesting, Lee Anderson, as a tonic to the hardcore Remainer Greg Hands who's been put in place. Is this a political team that you could vote for? And Lancashire Police say that they found no evidence of criminality in the disappearance of Nicola Bully and do not expect to find any as their investigation continues to the missing mum. I will be speaking to the man tasked with searching the river. He's got some unanswered questions that he wants to put to us live on air. Also, are we too soft on Islamist terrorists? Yes, but the Prevent scheme has been accused of treating them, believe it or not, like victims of a mental health disorder instead of the dangerous radical criminals that they really are. It's the latest incident, if you ask me, in soft touch Britain. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Would you scrap net zero? I want to know that, but really as well, are we too soft on terrorists? GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Patrick, good evening, everybody at home. Here are the latest headlines. The Prime Minister has revealed his new cabinet following a reshuffle today. He's also created 4 new departments. Greg Hands takes over as the new Conservative Party chairman after Nadeem Zahawi was sacked. Kemi Badenoch is the new Business and Trade Secretary. Lucy Fraser has become the Culture Secretary, taking over from Michelle Donnellan, who has been made new Science and Technology Secretary. The Business, Trade and Culture departments have been broken down into separate units, with Grant Shapps now the Energy Security Secretary. Rishi Sunak says the changes will help households.
It means that we can reduce people's energy bills. That's so important. It means we can produce more energy here at home, giving us independence and security. And it means we can transition to cleaner forms of energy as we hit our net zero ambitions and create jobs in the process, as we're seeing here today. That's why today's changes are really important. We're focused on delivering for the British people, and this will help us do that.
Well, in other news today, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has apologised to the Women of London for police failings after the sentencing of the former Met officer David Carrick. The 48-year-old has been handed 36 life sentences and will serve a minimum term of 30 years for sexual offences against a dozen women. Carrick pleaded guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, all carried out whilst he was serving in the force. Sir Mark says he's determined to root out misconduct in the force.
People are going to be very shaken by this. I completely recognise that. We are determined to tackle this. Most of our people are great people, but we've been too weak at getting rid of the ones who aren't. So you're going to see, month by month, changes as we remove those individuals, and you can report on that. I know my words today aren't enough, People have heard me talk about plans, and they're going to want to see the action that we take over forthcoming months, and they will see that.
Well, turning to news away from home, the Foreign Secretary is saying 3 British people are missing following the earthquakes in Turkey and in Syria. James Cleverly also told the Commons 35 other people have been caught up in the disaster, which has killed more than 5,000. Turkey's president has declared a state of emergency for 3 months in the 10 cities most impacted. An aid worker for Islamic Relief, Salah Abdulghassain, told GB News about the rescue effort.
There are fuel shortages, so some of the cranes and some of the tractors that we need that are so vital in such a time in order to clear that rubble, unfortunately we've got fuel shortages. Consistently there are electrical shortages, there are communication towers that have been sort of cut off at times, so it's really desperate. We're trying to get as many people as possible evacuated.
Here at home, Surrey Police have confirmed the deaths of Epsom College head teacher Emma Patterson and her daughter Letty are being treated as a murder investigation. Their 2 bodies were found along with Emma's husband George in the grounds of the school in the early hours of Sunday. The police have said George Patterson had recently been in contact with the police about his shotgun licence in order to change his address to the site of the school. Lancashire Police say they still believe Nicola Bulley fell into the River Wyre while she was out walking her dog 11 days ago. The underwater search for the mother of 2 continues. The force is also investigating around 500 lines of inquiry, although so far hasn't found any evidence of criminality. And her partner has issued a fresh appeal saying their 2 daughters desperately miss their mum and need her back. Superintendent Sally Riley says the police are exploring all possibilities.
We remain fully open to any information that is credible and factual to try and trace Nicola and bring answers for her family. But it does remain our belief that Nicola sadly fell into the river and that this is a missing person inquiry.
Now, the Shadow Climate Secretary, Ed Miliband, is calling on the government to bring forward what he's calling a proper windfall tax on energy companies after BP announced its biggest yearly profit in history. The energy giant has more than doubled its earnings from the year before, earning £23 billion in profits in 2022 after energy prices surged due to the war in Ukraine. BP Chief Executive Bernard Looney says stronger plant reliability and a lower cost of production help with profits. The Shadow Defence Secretary is to argue that cuts to the British Army must be halted to show the UK is a leading European member within NATO. In a speech at the Royal United Services Institute today, John Healey outlined Labour's plans to ensure the UK's duty to ensure the alliance are fulfilled in full. It follows Defence Secretary Ben Wallace conceding the armed forces had been hollowed out and underfunded. That's the latest news here on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Now, the victims of the serial rapist, former police officer David Carrick, have been praised for their bravery, as he was earlier sentenced to 36 life terms for his crimes. Judge Mrs Justice Chima Grubb said that the voice of courage cannot be denied while handing Carrick a sentence of at least 30 years behind bars at Southwark Crown Court earlier today. The 48-year-old is one of the country's worst sex offenders, and he joined the Met back in 2001. He pled guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, some of those multiple incidents, by the way, meaning they relate to at least 85 separate offences, including at least 71 sexual offences and 48 rapes. Well, this afternoon, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, described his crimes as a scar on our police force and added that it is vital we uncover how he was able to wear the uniform for so long. GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White is at Southwark Crown Court and he joins me now. Mark, yes, these question marks about how on earth it was allowed to happen for so long.
Well, yes, indeed, 17 years he went on to coerce young women to his house or to hotels sometimes, to then assault them and carry out these horrific sex attacks, and all the time, of course, using his power and status as a police officer to threaten these women that if they ever did pluck up the courage to go and report the crime, that the law would believe him and not them. We heard over the course of the last couple of days some really distressing accounts of what this man did to his victims, including the very first victim in 2003, a young woman who he'd met on a night out. They were in a pub. He had persuaded her to come home with him. He told her that, look, you know, you're safe. You couldn't be any safer. I'm a serving Metropolitan Police officer. So the woman went home with him. And then when she decided that actually she didn't want anything to do with him, he wouldn't let her leave. He attacked her and at one point pulled out what she said was a black handgun that he held against her head and said she's not going anywhere, before then further assaulting her and raping her. An absolutely appalling account, and typical of all of the victims who say they are still living with this daily trauma. Well, I've been looking back at this very disturbing case and the questions that now have to be answered by the Metropolitan Police and the wider policing family. As a Metropolitan Police officer, PC David Carrick was supposed to protect the public. Instead, he preyed on them, using his status as an armed officer to trick, control and silence his victims. A serial offender, he admitted to a staggering total of almost 50 offences, including 24 separate counts of rape. At Scotland Yard, the force may be under new management, but it is an all too familiar picture. A humiliating act of public contrition amid promises that the Met is focused on cleaning up its act.
We in policing have failed. He should not have been a police officer. There were many signs that we should have joined together. He should have been rooted out during his career as a police officer. It's upsetting to be stood here talking about this, and I apologise again to the victims, and indeed I apologise to the women of London.
PC Carrick worked as a firearms officer in the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, whose officers guard key buildings like Parliament, embassies and Downing Street. It's the unit where PC Wayne Couzens, another corrupt officer, served. He went on to kidnap, rape and murder marketing executive Sarah Everard in March 2021. The court heard how PC Carrick repeatedly humiliated his victims, locking some women in the understairs cupboard at his home here in Stevenage, or forcing them to clean his house naked, referring to his victims as slaves and telling them when they could eat and sleep. His crimes went undetected by the force he worked for, despite his behaviour being brought to the attention of senior officers on 9 separate occasions. In 2000, Carrick was accused of burglary and sending abusive messages, but the next year he passed the vetting procedures to join the Metropolitan Police. While serving, he was first accused of harassment and assault in 2002. He came to their attention again 2 years later after an alleged domestic incident. Despite a string of other allegations, none of them proven, he passed fresh vetting checks in 2017. In July 2021, he was placed on restricted duties after being arrested on suspicion of rape. But 2 months later, those restrictions were lifted after the charges were dropped. It was only in October that year that Carrick was finally suspended after prosecutors charged him following another allegation of rape at this hotel in St Albans by a woman he'd met on a dating app.
An absolute shocking case, this one.
Policing analyst Graham Wetton said this appalling breach of trust underlines the urgent need to change the standards and the culture within the UK's biggest police force.
This was a dreadful case, and it has to be a priority for the new Commissioner and the management team to address the issues with the Met, restore trust and confidence by looking at any offending that's gone on and root these people out of policing.
PC David Carrick's crimes have had a devastating impact on the lives of his victims. But the failure of his commanding officers to act far sooner has destroyed the trust of many others within the wider community. Mark White, GB News at Scotland Yard. Well, talking about the impact that it's had on the victims, we heard yesterday victim impact statements from all 12 of the victims. One woman said she encountered evil that day. Another woman talking about how she had turned to drink in the years since the attack on her. Others saying it had destroyed relationships going forward. So they're living daily with the consequences. And the police and Crown Prosecution Service believe that there will be other victims, undoubtedly other victims of David Carrick who are still out there. And they are now appealing to anyone else who was a victim, who feels that they can now come forward, seeing that this man has been brought to justice, and tell their story, to get in touch. This is the senior investigating officer from Hertfordshire Police and the Crown Prosecution said a little earlier.
I'm extremely relieved and pleased to be standing here today, knowing that as a result of the courage of the victims and the relentless hard work of my team, a serious and prolific sex offender is now safely behind bars. This has been one of the longest and most challenging investigations that I've ever been involved in. It is a testament to my officers' unwavering and dedicated pursuit for justice that David Carrick has been handed 36 life sentences today. I'm truly humbled by the bravery of the victims. Each one was prepared to live their horrendous ordeal and face Carrick in court. I would also like to thank the Crown Prosecution team at Thames Chiltern. We've worked side by side with the exceptional team of lawyers since October 2021, building a strong and compelling case. Our investigation does not stop here, however, and we've set up a special reporting portal to allow people to continue to share information with us. This portal will remain open and details can be found on the Hertfordshire Police website. I would urge anyone who thinks they've been a victim of David Carrick to come forward. We still want to hear from you and we will support you. As a serving police officer, David Carrick has brought shame on the profession and was not fit to wear the uniform. But I hope that our determination to get justice for the victims in this case will go some way to reassuring the public that nobody is above the law, and we will bring people like David Carrick to justice.
Today is about recognising the outstanding bravery of the victims. It often takes courage for anyone to come forward and report a rape, but in this case, to overcome the mental and physical oppression they endured may have felt insurmountable at times. We've heard the accounts of women who suffered at Carrick's hands. He took away their control, their right to choose, their freedom, in some cases both physically and mentally. We cannot undo the pain and anguish that they have endured, but I hope that they can take this first step in rebuilding their lives, knowing that he can't harm them or any other woman.
Mark White, thank you very, very much for bringing us that report. That's Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor. I'm joined in the studio now by former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Blexley. We're going to start by talking about this case, and then we're going to go for the latest as well on the missing Nicola Bulley case. Peter, just on this issue now with David Carrick, look, a lot of the viewers here are getting in touch, as you can imagine, gbviews at gbnews.uk, saying this minimum 30 years in prison, it's not enough. They're talking about bringing back hanging. They're talking about bringing back capital punishment for these crimes. One thing I would suspect is if this guy's a former police officer and a serial sex offender, I don't imagine he's going to do too well in prison.
No, but he's an absolute monster. I listened to Mrs Justice Chima Grubb's sentencing today, and a lot of the details of the depravity and the violence that he bestowed upon those poor victims is wicked beyond belief. And it is hugely irritating that he's only got 30, only got a minimum of 30 years. Unfortunately, there are sentencing guidelines which the judge has to abide by. But to hear him being given a discount because of his guilty pleas kind of reduces our criminal justice system to a Boxing Day sale.
Yeah.
And it's a bit demeaning. However, we're in the position that we are. I know that the Attorney General's office has already had a number of letters of complaint and people appealing what they see as an unduly lenient sentence. So if your viewers and listeners feel that way, then go on to the Attorney General, the website, and submit your point of view.
Yeah, and just from your perspective, as someone who's spent quite a bit of time around the Met, when it comes to people who are in, like, the firearms units and stuff like that, can it attract a certain type of wrong'un sometimes?
Unfortunately, many authorised firearms officers that I met exercise their biceps more than their brains. And I know that because sometimes they had to arrest me when I was undercover and throw me to the floor and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it does attract a particular kind of person. Not across the board, but certain kind of people like the macho bit. You know, you'll see them on the TV in the summer when they'll have a T-shirt where they show just a hint of bicep. You know, they've got it just there up enough because they love all of that, being big, tough guys with a big submachine gun. But it's more than just the standards and the culture that the Met's got to tackle here in order to regain public trust. What the public want to see is accountability. It doesn't matter that we'll be seeing 2 or 3 cops in court every week, like Sir Mark Rowley said the other week. It doesn't. That does matter. But what is important to win trust is that the people that have allowed Carrick to operate, to re-offend, those people need to be held to account. Not just for the Met to say, these are systematic failings. No, somewhere along the line, individual people have not done their job, and they need to be investigated, they need to be named and held to account.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that Mark Rowley, I mean, yes, all right, he wasn't in his current post while all of this nonsense was taking place, but he's going to get very used, by the sound of it, to standing up and making comments exactly like this. And there are only so many times the public are going to listen to it. Frankly, before they stop listening, can I just move us on a little bit from this particular topic now and talk about the Nicola Bulley case? This is the missing dog walker, missing mother, really, I should say, who went missing now. This is the 12th day that she's been missing. Shortly, fingers crossed, we're going to be hearing from Peter Faulding, who's fronting up this independent dive search for her. We had a press conference earlier on from Lancashire Police, and they are adamant that she's gone into the river. There is speculation mounting, some of it distasteful. One of the things that a lot of our viewers and listeners are racking their brains about, Peter, and hoping you can talk to me about this, is the Fitbit. Now, they're saying that she's wearing a Fitbit, which basically tracks your movements and stuff. People are saying, well, surely this has got to give some data. It monitors your pulse, it monitors your steps.
Yeah, indeed it does. Now, just imagine, for example, that I was wearing a Fitbit today. I'm not, but imagine if I was. For the minutes that I've been sat here talking to you, of course, the Fitbit wouldn't record any steps because I've not taken any. So it would show me as being static because the Fitbit, if it's synced either to the iCloud or to a phone or to some other device, is continually pumping out data, pumping out information. So that Fitbit would show that I've been static in so much as that I've not taken a step for a few minutes. Then when I get up to leave the studio, the Fitbit would start pumping out that data saying that I'm taking however many steps. It may be 6 or 8 steps to the studio door. I then, of course, may walk on beyond that and it would record all of those. So I would imagine that the police have definitely done some communications investigations around that Fitbit to see if it's churned out any data that might lead them to be as convinced as they are, because their position today hasn't changed since last Friday, that Nicola, unfortunately, they say they shot.
And they might not necessarily be inclined to be revealing all of that to us.
No, and forgive me a chuckle here. I'm not being disrespectful to Nicola. This is a dreadful set of circumstances. But I can imagine the police, in their naivety, not wanting to declare telecommunications capabilities because they're thinking, well, we might be educating criminals as to the stuff we can do. Well, we all watch TV dramas, we all read the papers, read
we're talking about
all of that, and we talk about it. It's out there. People know. It's the same as how the police will never, in a court case, admit that they tap telephones.
Right.
But of course, you stop any man, woman, child in the street, and they say, "Do the police tap telephones? You think?" And of course, they will resoundingly say yes. And of course, we know they do. But I suspect they want to keep that data, the investigations around that data, secret, which is why they're not telling us if there is such detail that may have helped them formulate their theory.
Formulate their theory. Thank you very much, Peter, as ever, my good man. Peter Plexi there, former Met police officer, detective, I should say. There you go. I demoted you then for a second, Peter. Sorry. Right, I can feel his eyes burning into the side of my head as we speak. Right, OK, we're moving on. Sunak's new cabinet has met for the first time this afternoon following his sweeping shake-up earlier. The creation of 4 new government departments aimed at boosting economic growth and addressing the energy crisis marks a major reshaping of some key government departments as Sunak seeks to put his stamp on Whitehall and deliver on his 5 key pledges. Let's go for more detail from Downing Street with political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, a lot of people think Rishi Sunak is dull. This was quite a dull reshuffle.
Well, insofar as he hasn't really been sacking people, so he hasn't made any more enemies. I think he's really trying to ruffle as few Conservative MPs' feathers as possible, given his first 100 days and the various factions within the party. So he's created these new departments, and really it's a bit of a reset moment for him. It was necessitated, of course, by the fact that he had to sack the Tory party chairman, Nadhim Zahawi, just over a week ago for the tax avoidance. And so there was a vacancy. He's brought into that role Greg Hands, who's been an MP for many, many years. He was a Remainer. He's very emollient. He's really a safe pair of hands. More surprising, perhaps, is the choice of Deputy Party Chairman, which is Lee Anderson, a real Red Wall MP, came in 2019, somebody very well known to this channel who does not mince his words. And I think he's brought Lee in really as a sort of counterbalance to Greg Hands, but that won't be to everybody's taste, certainly. And then these departments, and basically he's trying to focus. We're going to hear so much about these 5 key priorities of the government: getting growth, halving inflation, cutting waiting lists, stopping the boats, etc. And with this new department for energy security and net zero that he's put Grant Shapps in, there really is going to be a big focus on how we get our energy, where we get it from, and being sustainable looking forward. And then another big priority for Rishi Sunak is science, tech and innovation. He's created this new department. He's put Michelle Donnellan in charge of that because he really believes there's huge potential for the growth that we also know we desperately need in this country through those sorts of avenues: advanced manufacturing, tech, green technology, etc. So it's a reset moment, and he will be hoping that the media and the world will move on a little bit from what Liz Truss said next and what Boris Johnson's doing, and that tomorrow they might be talking about the government's priorities.
Yes, indeed. All right, Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster there, our political correspondent from the steps of Downing Street. How do you feel about this reshuffle? To be honest with you, I don't know why I asked that. How you feel? Probably a bit nonplussed, quite dull, nothing major really happening, apart from the obvious, I would argue, error, which is to create a department that both wants energy security and net zero. It is rather bizarre, if you ask me, that you want people to basically go, OK, all right, we're going to have energy security at the same time as doing everything we can to not annoy Greta, the Swedish school truant, who clearly we can't annoy, can we? Otherwise she might pull a nasty face at us. I don't see how those two things are going to actually marry up, but we'll have to wait and see. If anyone can do it, surely it's Grant Shapps. Said no one ever. Coming up, I'll be speaking to one of the divers who is searching for missing mum Nicola Bulley. Lancashire Police has given an update in their search for her this afternoon. They sought to reassure both Nicola's family and the public they're still exploring all possible lines of inquiry. But, as you're about to hear, the diver is charging this particular independent dive inquiry into it. He thinks there are a lot of unanswered questions, as indeed do you at home, so we'll get stuck into those. I'll be back in a tick.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News headlines at 5:30. The Prime Minister has revealed his new cabinet following a reshuffle. He also created 4 new departments. So Greg Hands takes over as the new Conservative Party chairman after Nadine Zahawi is sacked. Kemi Badenoch is the new Business and Trade Secretary. Lucy Fraser's become the Culture Secretary, taking over from Michelle Donnellan, who's been made a new Science and Technology Secretary. And the Business, Trade and Culture departments have been broken down into separate units, with Grant Shapps now the Energy Security Secretary. Also in the news, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has apologised to women in London for police failings after the sentencing of former officer David Carrick. The 48-year-old has been handed 36 life sentences and will serve a minimum of 30 years for sexual offences against a dozen women. Carrick pleaded guilty to 49 charges, including 24 counts of rape, all carried out while he was serving in the force. The Foreign Secretary says 3 British people are still missing following the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. James Cleverly also told the Commons 35 others has been identified as being caught up in the disaster, which has killed more than 5,000 people. Turkey's president has declared a state of emergency for 3 months in the 10 cities most impacted by the quake. And the father of an obese teenager has been found guilty of manslaughter by gross negligence. 16-year-old Kayleigh Titford was found dead at the family home in Newtown in Wales in 2020. She was found in conditions which were described as being unfit for any animal. Her mother was also found guilty of the same offence last year. Those are the latest news headlines on GB News. We're back at the top of the hour.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, massive story. This police investigating the disappearance of Nicola Bulley have urged the public to avoid distressing speculation about what may have happened to her. Speaking at a press conference in the past hour, Lancashire Police Superintendent Sally Riley said, "We would ask that people in the wider community, particularly on social media and online, do not speculate as to what may have happened to Nicola." I suppose it is quite tricky, though, and they are not particularly giving us any answers at the moment. It comes as the search for the 45-year-old missing mother reaches now its 11th day. She went missing on January the 27th in St Michael's-on-Wyre while walking her dog. Her partner has made a fresh appeal, saying her two daughters desperately miss her and need her back. Well, look, I'm very pleased to be able to say I can go now to the man who's been searching for Nicola in the water for the past 48 hours. It's Peter Faulding, and he's CEO of Specialist Group International. Peter, thank you very much. There are loads of unanswered questions to do with this. You are obviously trying to answer them. You have now presumably completed another day searching. Do you think she's in the river?
Again, Patrick, I don't want to speculate over this again. I don't want to be one of the speculators. It's a difficult one. We have conducted searches downriver yesterday, and we've searched the area where the police divers originally searched. I mean, let's go wind the clock back a bit. When Nicola went missing on the day, the police divers were deployed into the river here to search, and normally if somebody drowns they go straight to the bottom, and that's in my 20-odd years of experience of dealing with drowning victims, you know, done the hundreds of cases. Now, they go to the bottom, the river's slow moving, they won't go far, but the police divers, who are very professional, did not even find her then. And that's the weird thing.
A lot is being made of, oh, OK, this is a tidal river in parts, and, you know, it's shallower in certain areas, it's deeper in others. I think there are quite a lot of people who really are struggling to believe that if she was in there now after such extensive searches, as you've said, that she wouldn't have been found.
Yeah, I mean, there's a weir just down from the bench where I'm standing now where Nicola's phone was found and the dog harness, and the police divers have been in again today, but we've been using high-frequency side-scan sonar in this stretch today, and it's so detailed I can even see every stone of it. She's not in this stretch. We also sonared the other side down yesterday in the tidal river. Now, if you take a football on a tidal river, and anyone who works on the Thames will confirm this, you throw a football in, when the ebbing tide, when the tide goes out, the ball will go down the stream, and then as soon as the tide turns, it will come back in again. It'll end up back at the same place. We see dead animals doing that in rivers when we search. So for Nicola to get out of the sea would be impossible, literally. It's such a long way in the 11 days. It's an awful long way down. And there's also lots of shallows. Over the weir, it's very shallow. It's all stones, even if the river level was up slightly. So I don't know.
No, and look, I understand absolutely that you don't want to speculate. I'm sure our viewers and our listeners there can read into what you're saying. I mean, it's difficult not to speculate when it does simply seem to boil down to an issue at the minute, which is she in the river or not? And taking at face value everything that you've said there, it does look increasingly unlikely that she is. The police did issue that conference earlier on. And, Peter, I don't know if you saw it. I think you might have been there, actually. But they did say, basically, look...
I was working. No, I was working.
Oh, fair enough, yeah. But they did say that, with respect, you're not necessarily in possession of all of the full facts or any more information than any normal member of the public. What did you make of that?
Well, if there's any more facts that we don't know about, I mean, normally we work along the side of the police, and if you haven't got the facts, then you can't conduct a proper search. It's very difficult without that information. Normally, I'm privy to that information on a lot of these searches. I'm dealing with a lot of classified work, and obviously I don't ever speak about that. But this is, if there's more information, I certainly don't know about it, which it would be useful to know.
I can imagine, yes, absolutely. There are as well some strange things, perhaps, that don't seem to add up in this case. And, for example, you seem to be saying that the bench itself wasn't a particularly secured area. There wasn't a load of police tape around it. There are issues with the dog as well. I mean, why it wasn't behaving in a more erratic way or more worked up, for example. Do you have a look at this particular operation now and identify some elements to this that don't seem to add up for you?
I don't know honestly about the police operation. I mean, the police were here on day one with the underwater search team, and it was, to be fair here, if it's a crime scene, then the area's sealed off as a crime. When you work on a drowning, which this is, then you would tape the area off anyway. Normally you tape an area off and keep the public away, because you're dealing with a drowning, a search operation where the public shouldn't be allowed because they don't want to see what you're going to recover. So yeah, I've said about the decoy. What I said is, if Nicola is not here anywhere where we can't find her, then I've worked on cases where a phone has been. Not a phone. We found a stiletto shoe by a river once on a search of murder up north near Scunthorpe, Alston Ferry, and the shoe was laid by the river by the murderer to detract the search from that area, and she was actually found in a haystack miles away. And that's the reason I said that, if she's not here and there's no sign of her anywhere over the next few days, then I can understand why people are speculating about this. You've got to keep an open mind on this type of inquiry. But obviously, if the police have got more information than I know about, then, that will be useful a lot of the time on extra information. It helps you with a search, but that might not be important information.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense, wouldn't it, to give the chap with the world-class sonar technology the opportunity to try to use that to the best of his abilities. I mean, that would seem quite an obvious thing there. Can I just ask you a couple of quick ones, if that's all right? I've had viewers getting in touch saying, how deep is the river exactly where the police seem to think that Nicola went in? And also, how did you come to be involved in this search? Did the family get in touch with you? How did it work?
Right, so it went out about where Nicola went in, just off from the bank, is about 4 metres, so that a deep pipe. So deep enough to drown, but also a big trough and deep enough to go in, which the police thoroughly searched with their divers, wasn't there, and searched down the river. How did we get involved? Well, this search has been going on. Whenever somebody goes missing, we get lots of requests to our control room to assist. Now, we don't call the police because we cover police diving operations for Kent, Essex, Surrey, Sussex, Thames Valley and Hampshire Police. So we are the official dive team. So we get called on emergency calls and deal with it straight away. Now, in this particular case, this is not our area. So we got lots of calls through control. Can you help this family? So we contacted the family through social media, and then they requested us through the police. And then later on that afternoon, the police agreed that we could come up and assist them, and we've been working closely ever since. And that's how we actually got involved with this inquiry.
All right, just one final one very quickly, Peter.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, no, I'll start if you don't mind. Just a bit pressed for time. Just a bit pressed for time. So, are you going to be searching for a good number of days, or are you going to draw a line under this at some point and say, look, I think enough's enough now?
Yeah, we'll probably be here for the next couple of days, Patrick, just to iron everything out. I want to be sure to put my name to this search that, we've checked everything. I'm very thorough, and I want to make sure we've done the most thorough job and try and bring some form of closure or confirm or deny the river to the family and the police.
Yeah, look, Peter, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I know you're a busy man.
Thank you, Patrick.
And we'll let you get back to it. Peter Folding there, who is the CEO of the specialist group International. In licensing that, I thought, just want to read out what the police said earlier on, which is clearly Mr Folding isn't included within all the investigation detail any more than members of the public are. That I'm briefing through these sorts of press conferences, and that was Superintendent Sally Riley who said that earlier at the press conference, which we took live. Peter there quite clearly saying, look, hey, I am abreast of the information. If there's any more, would you mind telling me so that I can do my best to look for Nicola? And I think we can all agree that probably makes sense, although clearly we can all understand what Peter was saying there, which is pretty certainly, anyway, he is about as convinced as he can be that it's unlikely that she is in that river. Interesting. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, a report into Britain's counter-terrorism programme is set to find that it treats radicalism as a mental illness. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? Yes, that jihadi, he's just mentally ill. So are our authorities taking the threat of terrorism seriously enough? I'll be back in a moment.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
OK, now, a new report inquiring into the government's Prevent scheme is expected to find that the organisation is too focused on addressing the personal vulnerabilities of extremists, with terrorism treated as a mental illness. Oh, was he about to strap himself into a suicide vest? And was he about to detonate that outside a primary school? Oh, he must have a mental illness. William Shawcross is set to say that Prevent focuses too much on safeguarding rather than protecting the public. It's soft-touch Britain. I'm absolutely sick of it. However, he also stresses how he witnessed time and again Prevent save lives, tackle the causes of radicalisation and prevent individuals from potentially carrying out acts of terrorism. So, are our officials not taking the threat of terrorism too seriously? With me now is David Haig, who's international human rights lawyer. David, thank you very much. Without wanting to put too fine a point on it, I am bang in favour of human rights, just not really for terrorists. Your view?
Well, I absolutely. I think here that the problem that you've got is that the thing to remember is that this scheme effectively was this Prevent scheme is the government scheme to tackle basically radicalisation leading to terrorism. And what we now have is William Shawcross coming with a conclusion from a report that was put in place by the then Home Secretary. It's the government scheme and the government's review saying that effectively it's not fit for purpose, and that could lead to significant damage to protecting Brits by simply, basically, for want of a better phrase, saying that everyone, like you said, that's a terrorist has a mental health illness, and that simply can't be true.
No, it simply can't be true, absolutely. And, you know, the interest of human rights, I can understand that you don't want to necessarily tarnish everyone with the same brush. And Prevent, by the way, it would be a nice touch if Prevent was actually doing exactly what it was saying on the tin. There are serious allegations that money was going to certain groups who just continue to use that money to help fund even more radical things and actually help indoctrinate even more people, which is the opposite of what it's supposed to do. The taxpayer was, in some cases, paying for radicalisation, it has been alleged. But, David, what about the human rights of people like you and I? What about the human rights of members of the public who get on a tube or get on a bus? Surely their human rights have to trump those of somebody who is even just accused of, frankly, being a member of ISIS.
Well, absolutely. I think you've got a very, very valid point. Now, obviously there will be some very vulnerable people that are targeted by extremists to do acts of terrorism. But I cannot imagine that that would be every single one. And quite rightly, like you said, this is the government scheme designed to protect people effectively by targeting extremism. Now, if we look at some of the facts that have come out in the report, of the 13 kind of last terror attacks in the UK, 7 of them, so more than half effectively, are ones that were under review of this organisation, effectively, of Prevent. One of them being the murder of David Amess. So could you argue that the human rights of those people that have been attacked, targeted and suffered because of this scheme potentially not tackling things correctly have been abused? And I would say that you could, definitely.
Yeah, indeed. Look, David, thank you very much. Short and sweet, but that's just the way it is at the end of this particular show, I'm afraid. David Haig, really appreciate your time as ever. Won't be long until I talk to you again. International human rights lawyer. Just on that David Amess case, I really thought when that Tory MP was sadly murdered by a jihadi, I really thought that that was going to be a watershed moment when, depressingly, when one of their own as the MPs was slaughtered by this individual. I thought that would be a turning point. And I've got to be honest with you, sickened, really, to hear a lot of MPs use that as a way of trying to clamp down on things like online hate speech. Yeah, all right, online hate speech is terrible. But the problem was the fact that this guy was a radical Islamist jihadi and was allowed to go and carry out this attack despite being known to authorities, not the fact that people were putting some fruity material out there online. But we're moving on from that now. Former First Minister Alex Salmond has criticised his successor, Nicola Sturgeon, saying that her gender, I'm quoting now, nonsense, has set Scottish independence back years. Mr Salmond has accused Sturgeon of adopting daft ideology imported from elsewhere, as she failed to provide any clarity about whether she regarded transgender rapist Isla Bryson as male or female. Joining me now, I should say, is Alba Party MP for Kilcardy and Cowdenbeath, Neil Hanvey, and former SNP Glasgow City Councillor Austin Sheridan. Chaps, I'm just going to let you two have it out, really. I think I've done enough talking on this one for now. I will start with you, Neil. Do you think that Nicola Sturgeon's trans ideology has set back independence?
Yeah, I think it's done more damage than that, actually. I think it's damaged LGBT rights because what has invariably happened is that people have used this legislation or the build-up to this legislation to use it as a cloak to cover up their predation and criminality. And Adam Graham is just another example of that. I raised my concerns about this in 2019 with Shirley Ann Somerville, about Katie Delatowski, who was in my constituency and assaulted a 10-year-old girl and was on the headlines of the newspaper saying trans woman attacks a 10-year-old girl, and it should have said paedophile attacks 10-year-old girl. And this is really damaging to people who I care about in the trans community, and we must be sensible about how we protect everyone in society. We have a social construct, social contract that ensures that safeguarding is robust and is in place. And unfortunately, queer theory and its adherents are damaging that by their actions.
OK, all right. Well, I will just throw that over to you. Austin, same question, really. Has Nicola Sturgeon's trans push, as it were, damaged the cause for independence?
No, it certainly hasn't. I find Alex Salmond's comments, to be extremely sad, to be honest. That a former First Minister would speak about giving people rights as daft ideology and self-indulgence. I felt that was extremely insulting. The Alba Party was constructed in order to oppose GRA legislation. Every single one of their candidates opposed GRA legislation during the Scottish parliamentary election campaign. The reason that was done, I believe, was because Alex Salmond has a personal vendetta against the First Minister. He has tried to use this issue to essentially try and damage the credibility of Nicola Sturgeon. But I can tell you something, it won't work. Alex Salmond sounds like an angry old man. He's created a party that has racists, that has homophobes and transphobes in it. And the people of Scotland, have rejected them every time at the polls.
I do get that, Austin. I get that, Austin. Some would argue, though, that the opinion polls would suggest that the vast majority of Scots do not back the GRA, but some quite strong allegations there about racism and homophobia within your party, Neil. I have to let you come back to that.
Absolutely ludicrous nonsense from Austin, straight out of Pete Wishart's playbook. It's quite embarrassing to hear him speak about fellow nationalists in the way that he just has. We are a party that is founded on the principle of moving independence forward. That conversation has been sidelined because of the First Minister's obsession with gender politics, and it has damaged the independence movement and put people in very difficult situations. Austin supported the Alba Party when it was first formed, and then he wrote back on it.
I'm going to get that's enough from that, Neil, now, because I've only got a few seconds, I'm afraid. Sorry, Neil. Austin, very quickly, very quickly. If you had to choose, if you had to choose between independence.
His party. Every candidate supported it was anti-GRA. His party was founded to campaign against this. He had candidates in Edinburgh that were calling
guys, you know what? I'm going to leave it. To be honest with you, it's just two angry Scottish men shouting at each other now. We're going to leave it. Get them off. Yes, thank you very much. About time. Good grief. Neil Hamby there. And former SNP, Glasgow City Councillor Austin Sheridan. They're still going at it. I can hear them. Thank you very much. Patrick Christys here. Michelle's next with Jubes & Co. Stay tuned.
Good afternoon, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Another frosty one tonight across the south, some dense patches of fog likely as well. A bit more cloud further north, which will keep the temperatures up. It's also going to be turning increasingly windy. Look at the isobars out to the northwest. As this weather front approaches, those winds will really be picking up in the northwest. But elsewhere, the isobars are well apart, light winds allowing the frost to come back pretty sharply this evening, temperatures tumbling. And the fog will also start to thicken up before midnight across parts of northern England, but especially the Midlands, southern parts and eastern parts of Wales, East Anglia and southern England. Some dense patches of fog likely by Wednesday morning. Cold as well, -2, -3, towns and cities. Rural spots much lower than that. But not as cold further north. There'll be the winds picking up and there'll be more cloud. But the winds will strengthen further during Wednesday, getting very windy in the far northwest. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place covering the Western Isles and parts of the northwest of the mainland of Scotland. 75-mile-an-hour gusts are possible, particularly as this rain band moves in through the afternoon. That could cause some travel disruption. Could be some disruption from the fog in the south as well, but that should clear by late morning. And then it's another sparkling day of sunshine with temperatures close to average, getting up to 7 to 9 Celsius. Perhaps a little higher in eastern Scotland, but it will be windy here. And then this rain band sinks southwards, bringing a bit of snow in its wake across northern Scotland for a time on Wednesday evening. As it pushes south into Thursday, it's fizzling out. So again, most of England and Wales not seeing much rain at all, but it will be cloudier. So it won't be as cold or as foggy on Thursday morning across the south. In fact, it's generally a dry and a bright day for many on Thursday, but there will be showers coming into western Scotland. Still very windy across the far north, just not as windy as Wednesday. Brighter skies coming in across the south by the afternoon, and temperatures again mostly in mid to high single figures.